Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Apologetics 101, and welcome to the Tompkins controversy series. This is great. I'm actually filming this on the morning, not like really early morning of Christmas Eve. So no rest for the weary. So Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, because by the time y'all see this video, because I'm gonna take the rest of the week to edit it. So by the time y'all see this video, it's going to be close to the New Year and after Christmas. So hope everyone had a good Christmas, and hope everyone have a good New Year as well. We're fixing to push off into the new year. I can't wait. Lots of developments, lots of stuff happening in on this channel, on this series, and I'm gonna try to see if I can get some videos in on the Genesis series as well, because I want to continue doing that. So great stuff coming up for next year. Awesome. But today we are going to be talking about we're going to be talking about various parameters in BLAST that are sometimes brought up in this controversy. One of them is a particular parameter called max hsps1 that sometimes gets brought up, and we're going to sit there and talk about that. We're also going to be talking about e-values, and we are going to spend a good deal of our time talking about controls, experimental controls, something that gets brought up a lot because it's brought up by Erika, it's brought up by Swami Das originally. It's brought up about a lot of people, different people in this controversy, and a lot of people are under the impression that Tompkins didn't use controls. We're going to see from his papers whether Tompkins ever used controls when he did his experiments. All right, but that comes later. Okay, but anyway, without further ado, let's dive in. And again, I'm glad you're with me here today, and we'll jump right in. All right. That that is what we're dealing with today. We're talking about certain parameters in BLAST. We're going to be talking about experimental controls. We're going to be talking about e-values. All right. First, and of course, I got some clips I want to show you, including one particular conversation that I had with Dr. Korf originally on e-values. Um, and this was probably our second conversation. It's not one I've shown yet. But it's what I'm going to show this time around. Now, understand something, Dr. Korf, as a disclaimer, Dr. Korf does not no longer take the position that this is his Tompkins' main issue. What he perceives as Tompkins' main issue. He thinks that the issue is masking. He thinks this. I think he would say that this is a issue, but he doesn't think it's the issue. He doesn't think it's the main issue that's driving force of that. Now, of course, again, I think he has some misunderstandings of Tompkins' study, but while I'm already on that subject matter, I might as well mention something that went on in the comment section. Well, in the comment section, Dr. Korf had left me a comment. Let me jump right into that. Okay, here we are. Dr. Ian Korf left me a comment. Said, after all this time I spent trying to educate you on how BLAST works, you still end up misrepresenting me. Thanks. I didn't know what he was talking about because he doesn't give any specific example here. He just claimed that. And so I said, I didn't misrepresent you. Your words are your own in the video, and mine are my own in the video. My argument is mine and not yours. I now voiced this in the video that you disagreed with me. there was no misrepresentation. A disagreement is not the same as misrepresentation. Thanks and God bless. All right, that's what I put there because I wasn't exactly sure what he was talking about. I even include that disclaimer. As you can see here, I include the disclaimer also here in the post, just to make sure everybody knew that everybody understand that ultimately he wouldn't agree with me, but he actually wasn't talking about that. What he was actually referring to here is that he claims that he was talking when he said that he thinks that Tompkins is doing an overall global percent. He thinks it's on certain papers, he claims. Now, in the video clippings, as well as in our discussions with me and him, he never once brought up specific papers. He never once brought up specific papers on the subject matter, ever. And I brought this up in the email, too, when he just said that. He makes you think he's talking about blast, right? He says, after all this time I spent trying to educate you on how blast works, he automatically starts off making you think that it's related to blast. Now, in reality, it's actually not related to blast. In the email, it was related to Tompkins' study, something I said about where his position was on Tompkins' study. Now, he made general comments to me on Tompkins' study. Again, he never addressed a specific study. He just basically said, this is what he thinks Tompkins is doing. And so I reported on what he said. Now, obviously, I'm not misrepresenting him if I did that. Now, there's always a possibility, of course, that he could have a specific study in the back of his head and just not mention it. But I was commenting on his overall, his general take of Tompkins' study, because that's what he gave me. He gave me his general take of Tompkins' study, and so that's what I was reporting on. And so I was not misrepresenting him at all. Now, of course, now understand something. Something you're gonna find out today from one of the clips that Dr. Korf that I have for you, is a clip with Dr. Korf actually being inconsistent. You'll see that in the discussion. So you're going to see him actually go back and forth. But Dr. Korf, when he's trapped up into a corner, I found he will actually contradict himself, even within 5 minutes. So it's possible that the reason he's saying this is because I showed an email from Tompkins where he took the best alignment. He took the highest scoring alignment. So he's not doing a global percent of all the research results. Now, according to Korf, he has different problems with other papers that he wrote outside of the ones he thinks that he's doing this global percent alignment. I asked him, okay, what they are. If you want to send me those issues, I will look at them. And he pretty much told me to buzz off after that. So it was like, okay. So he's not going to send me the specific problems. Probably because, I don't know, maybe he doesn't actually know enough about Tompkins' study to be able to give that information out. But I don't know. But either way, he has a tendency to contradict himself when he's on the spot. And you'll see that today in one of the clips that I have of Dr. Korf. Let's go back. So yeah, he has a tendency to be inconsistent as a result. And so this could be a sign of his inconsistency because he's backed up in the corner. He sees that Tompkins actually confirmed that he was taking the highest scoring hit. He wasn't doing a global percent. Now, ironically, I do think Erika's doing that. And in my last video, I talked about this, and I think that Carter had actually confirmed this. Now, I'd already made the video by the time I found out that Carter had confirmed what my suspicions and me and his suspicions were on Erika's self-analysis, that she was doing a global percent of all the searches. I'll explain what that is in a second, but me and Carter both realized that he was doing or that she was doing a global percent of all the search results, and we didn't figure that out until while I was in the process of editing, Unfortunately, I didn't add that in, but I did put it in the post that I left pinned to the top. All right, I want to explain that point a little bit further. Essentially, what I think is happening is that Erika is doing a global percent of the total matches. Tompkins isn't doing this. This is why I say that the Erika didn't. Well, it's one of the reasons. As far as self to self, this would be the case. It may be the case for the other matches too. If she's doing a global percent, this could get her inaccurate matches as well. In terms of what she's doing, she says she's doing it in terms of range because chromosomes are different sizes and things like that. So, like I said, I don't think Erika really knows what she's doing because BLAST doesn't give you a report of different ranges, even for a chromosome. So she has to kind of do a little guessing there in order to do a ranging. But like I said, I really don't know. I really don't know. Well, I don't think that Erika knows what she's doing. I do not. But I want to explain what I mean when I talk about global percent. Say if you say, let's make it simple. Of course, it's going to be a lot more matches than that, usually. Now, sometimes it's only a couple, but most, if it's a small sequence. But most of the time, you usually get a lot of alignment matches back. And this could be due to a lot of different factors. It could be due to high E value. It could be due to you masking or not masking the repeats. It could be due to a wide variety of reasons because you create all kinds of other alignments in the data set. And even if you use masking and a very low E value, you could still get some other alignments to happen. It's always possible, but the E value is intended to try to reduce that down, that background noise, and so you don't get that. But in any given case, the spurious, you got spurious alignments as a result that can come as a result of that, and there's spurious alignments in Tompkins' search results, I believe. For probably it could be a combination of him using not using masking and using E value or higher enough E value, or a combination of the two. But I don't think that his E value is affecting it very much, if it's affecting it at all. It could be affecting it a little bit, but not. I don't think it's major, because whenever I did some of the experiments, the E value didn't even seem to factor into it. Whether I used masking or unmasking, it seemed to be the same. So the E value didn't really impact it too much when I did some experiments with that in this video you're about to see later. But in any case, what I think is going on. By the way, I'm adding this in post. You probably already figured that out, but I'm adding this as I'm editing the video. I just thought I'd throw that in there. But anyway, here's what I think was going on. All right, let's say for simplistic purposes, we have 5 different alignments that happen. Okay, let's say you mask the repeats. If you mask the repeats, you won't have that repetitive stuff, and it won't create a lot of extra alignments. And these alignments are the extra alignments that are being created from these repetitive elements aren't very long. They're short sequences, so they're usually never. If you do a self-to-self analysis with that, it would never get 100% if you're doing that. But putting that aside for a second, let's say if you had 5 alignments. Okay, put my hand in the camera here. 5 alignments, and let's say all 5 of them are 100%. If you do a global alignment on all 5 alignments, use gauging 100% scale, what would you come up with? Well, if you're doing 100% scale, if you're factoring in those 500s and you're totaling it up as 100% scale, and they're all 100%, each alignment's 100%, then it's going to come up to mathematically 100%. Okay, that's why she gets 100% on her self-to-self, because her repeats are being masked out. Now, Tompkins isn't using any masking because a lot of these low complexity regions are where a lot of the differences are. So he wants every sequence in order to test that, in order to see where it will create more differences as a result. All right. So he doesn't mask out the repeats, but he uses the best alignment. Now, with Erika, because she's thinking that he's totaling up the matches, let's say if you have, let's say you have 5 alignments again, but this time each one's a different percent. Like the first one, the best alignment, it's always going to be 100%. So it's 100%. Then you have, let's say 90%, 80%, 70%, 60%. All right, so you have those 5 alignments, and they are each a different percentage. Okay, or even if a couple of them are the same, it wouldn't matter. But I'm just using this hypothetically. And you did a global percent of that, and engaged it on a 100% scale. Would you get 100% out of that? No, you wouldn't. So if you total up all the percentage of all the matches in doing one sequence, and you got all the alignments being added up, and it's going against itself, which is also adding up all the alignments, and it's doing it on a total of 100% scale, and they're not all 100%, and they're not all the same length, and you got lots of spurious alignments involved in it. Would you get 100%? No. That's why she doesn't get 100% on Tompkins. But she's not actually replicating Tompkins' method correctly. If she was, she'd be using the best alignment. Now, what if I took not those 5 results exactly, but the first one, which is 100%. Okay? And then I compare it against itself. Would I get 100%? Yes. I would get 100% every single time. It's because she's factoring those other 4 in the 5th one together that she's getting less than 100%. That's why she's getting less than 100%. That's what I think is actually going on here. And I want to point that out so that way I can clarify what exactly it is that's going on. I want to make sure I spelled it out, because I did focus on randomness at the time, because I conflated some information in my head and I had to correct all that. And a lot of this stuff got hashed out a little bit after I'd already finished the video, and so I kept on trying to input corrections here and there, and I still missed a few things, and so that way. But I was able to fix that toward the end, and I was able to sit there and put it in the post, pinned it at the top. But I want to make sure that I spell out what I actually think is going on here. And Dr. Carter seemed to confirm this, because when he did a global percent of all those matches, I think he said he had over 1 million matches, and when he did a global percent, it came to 86.6, which is in the middle of where Erika got. Erika got 83% on her main video, and her when she did self to self on her response to my Tompkins interview, she got like, I think 89%, somewhere in there. But the 86% fit right there in the middle. It was very similar to what Erika had gotten. That's exactly what Erika did. But it's not replicating Tompkins' method correctly. If you replicate Tompkins' method correctly, you're going to get 100%. Because if you take the best alignment and you put it against itself, that's a 1-to-1 match. And a 1-to-1 match on a sequence that's the same, it's always going to be 100%. Always. Did Erika do this? No. And that lies the problem. So y'all could be able to see that. But Carter took all the matches together. He said that he came up with over 1 million matches, and then when he totaled it together, on a 100% scale, it came to 86.6%, which is very close to what Erika came up with. When I looked at Erika's videos, I saw that where she came up with less than like in the 83% range or 89% range, and so the 86% kind of fit right there in the middle of what she got on Tompkins' result, allegedly replicating Tompkins' method. Except she didn't replicate Tompkins' method. If she had replicated Tompkins' method, she would have taken the highest scoring hit. But she doesn't do that. She does a global percent. I don't think Erika knows what she's doing. I think she took a percentage of all the matches instead of taking the highest scoring hit. and I think that's why she went less than 100%. That's why I think she did. Um, but we'll hit more into that later. All right, so we're going to dive right into this. The first thing I want to talk about is the hsps 1 setting. But before I do that, I want to play a clipping of Erika, and we're going to start that now.
Okay, so it takes a little longer to run Tompkins' method because he doesn't have a very critical parameter in there. And while that's running, I'm going to show you what that parameter is using Excel here. So remember that was good that returned 100% similarity in max target sequence 1 here. What we did is we had this little parameter here, max hsps 1, right? Max hsps 1. Tompkins' 2013 methods, they don't have that. And my understanding of how BLAST works is that's what's making sure that we're only returning like the best matches instead of like any willy-nilly partial 10 base pair match. And that's what drags his percent similarity down, despite the fact that he's using ungapped, or that's what pulls the similarity down further with ungapped, even when you're comparing something to itself. So the ungapped is the problem. The fact that he's missing this, I guess, critical parameter here makes the problem worse. Really, it's mostly ungapped. And there you go.
All right. um, uh, First of all, that's not well. First of all, neither one of those drag the number down when you do self to self, because of the fact that gap and ungap doesn't really impact self to self at all, because that doesn't create spurious alignments and things like that. You can create more matches, but you wouldn't be able to create spurious alignments with that. Low complexity regions are the way in which you create spurious alignments. And there's two ways you can do that: masking and e-value, depending on if you have too high of an e-value, or if you have masking not enabled, then that would cause a lot of repetitive stuff to show up. Now, there are ways around that. For example, you can take the best alignment, which is what Tompkins did. Tompkins didn't take all the total matches together like that. He took, so it wouldn't really matter if he has spurious alignments in his search results, because he's not using any of those. He's using the top result. He's using the best alignment. The highest scoring hit is what he's using. So therefore he's not actually taking any of those. But none of those things would actually drag his percent down. So we talked about that last week, and none of those things would drag his percentage down. Because gap versus ungap doesn't create spurious alignments. And the max hsps 1, what exactly is that parameter? Essentially, that affects what BLAST reports, not the search results. It doesn't create spurious alignments and things like that. It creates, or it doesn't create anything. It just basically is what BLAST reports. Instead of reporting all, if you set it to set it to max hsps 10, you get 10 lines of data, including the best alignment. You get the best alignment at the top, but you also get these other 9 search results as a result. If you set it to max hsps 1, then you only get 1 result, because you won't. There's no point in saving the second, third, or fourth result. You get the top result regardless. Now, if you don't set the max, and me and Carter talked about this. I actually have an email from him where he explains all of this. If you don't set the max hsps parameter, it just means you get all the matches. That will only be a problem if you're just kind of calculating all the matches up. But that's not what Tompkins is doing. Tompkins is taking the best alignment. He's taking the top result. He's taking the highest scoring hit. That's what he's taking. So all you do is you get all the matches reported. That's all you would do. It just affects the report of the matches. It doesn't actually affect or impact the search results, and it doesn't create spurious alignments, so it's not dragging percentages down. Now, me and Erica both agree that there's spurious alignments in the search results. We just disagree on uh, what is causing that. She thinks that it's being caused by ungapped alignment, him using ungapped, but that's not true because even when he used gapped in his 2018 paper, he still had this spurious results in the search results, regardless. So obviously that's not what's creating it. And the max HPS one has absolutely nothing to do with the search results, and it doesn't create spurious alignments. What that does is it affects what BLAST actually reports. Whether it reports the first match, the second match, third match, the first 10 matches, whatever the case may be. All it does is affect what it reports. But you can take the best alignment, whether you use this parameter or whether you don't use this parameter, you can still take the highest scoring hit. The highest scoring hit is always the best alignment. And that is what Tompkins is taking. So it's not going to impact anything unless you're doing a global percent alignment, which of course I think Erika is doing. And she's not replicating Tompkins' results correctly. As I mentioned in the last video when we did the self analysis and we talked about that self control with that I think Erika is doing a global percent alignment. And me and Carter was going back and forth on this while I was editing the video, and so I never really got. I had to put it in the post that I left pinned at the top. I end up indicating this at the top that Carter confirmed my suspicions, and that Erika was doing a global percent alignment. She was taking all the search results, and when you put all the searches together on a 100% scale, it's going to come to in the 80s. And Korf, as we're going to see here in a little bit when we talk about controls, Korf is going to assume the same thing. He's going to assume that Tompkins is doing that. Now, he said that he's only assuming a specific paper, but as you see, he doesn't bring up any specific paper. So even if he had those in his back of his mind, he makes general comments on Tompkins' study. So, and that's what I was responding to. But that's completely incorrect. Tompkins is taking the best alignment. He always takes the best alignment. He takes the highest scoring hit. So he's not taking it a global percent alignment. I don't think Erika's know what she's doing, so she's taking a global percent. According to Carter, when he did it, he came up with over 1 million hits. And when he did a global percent alignment of all that, he said, you know what it comes up to? 86.6%. 86.6%, which is very similar to what Erika came up to when she did a self analysis when she allegedly replicated Tompkins' method, and she came up with I think in one experiment, and in her main video was like 83%, somewhere on there, 83-84%. In her other video that she did. She came up with the one that she responds to my Tompkins interview. She came up with like I think around 86 to 89% or 89%, something like that, around there, 88, 89%. So 86% falls somewhere in the middle of that. So that's very close to what Erika had gotten, and so I think that Erika is doing a global percent because one thing, she doesn't know what she's doing. And secondly, she thinks that Tompkins is doing this, which Tompkins is not, and that's what she's coming up with, but that's not at all. That's not what Tompkins is doing at all. But anyway, the HPS, the max HPS one, that does affect what BLAST reports. It doesn't really impact what the search results. It doesn't create spurious alignments. Low complexity regions could create this, but if you do it a certain way, but it's not. This wouldn't be created by gap versus ungap, HPS at 1, any of that stuff. That just impacts what BLAST reports, whether it reports the first alignment, whether it reports the second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever the case may be. That's all it does. If you don't have that, then it reports all the search results. But it's the top result is still the top result. The top result is still going to be the highest scoring hit. It's still going to be the best alignment. and you still take the best alignment no matter which way you go. So that's the thing. It doesn't create some kind of global percent alignment or anything like that. Like I said, I don't think Erika knows what she's doing, and she doesn't fully understand Tompkins' study. And so she's taking a global percent alignment of all the matches rather than the top one. In a little bit, we're going to talk about controls, experimental controls. This one's going to be interesting because I have a clip from Korf, actually, where he disagrees with Tompkins on it, and he thinks that Tompkins didn't use controls, which we'll find out in a minute is false. But we're going to go into that, and we're going to discuss his views on that, at least what he says on recorded. Now, chances are he'll go in the comment section and contradict himself or something, but it doesn't change what I've got on the recording and what he told me specifically, and that's all I have to rely on. Okay. I can't help it if he goes back on it, if he changes his mind, if he contradicts himself. I'm not responsible for any of those things. I can only be held responsible for what he actually does say, and commenting on that. Okay, that's the only thing I can be held responsible for, because I can't read minds, and I can't predict that he's going to change his mind or revert back or contradict himself or anything like that. But in any case, all right, moving forward. What's the difference between this max hsps parameter versus max target sequence 1? Max target sequence 1, basically, again, it just affects what it was report. Simply put, max target sequence 1 just refers to a target sequence is like a chromosome. So if say, for example, you set your sight on chromosome 1, you blast chromosome 1, against chromosome 1, the best hit's always going to fall on chromosome 1, and then it doesn't really matter if your second best alignment is on chromosome 2 or whatever the case would be. And so Carter defines this as kind of a weird parameter, but it's there. I know that's not really an issue in this controversy. I just wanted to point out the difference between that and max hsps 1. And so let's move on E values. I actually have a clip from, I'm going to be playing 2 clips today, of course, and one of them is going to be on E values. Now, just to clarify, Korf no longer believes this is a major issue in terms of Tompkins. He thinks it's a issue, but he doesn't really think it's the primary issue. He thinks that ultimately it's not going to, there's going to be some effect in the background noise, but not like a lot. At least that's based on what he told me afterwards. So he's kind of changed his mind on this a bit after he found out that Tompkins didn't use mask. So he decided to so he doesn't hold to that view exactly, but it does give some good information concerning E values. I figured I'd go ahead and show it, and then we could talk about a little bit more about E values and that sort of thing as a result. So let's play the clip.
Approved to record. Cool.
Okay.
All right. Let me tell you about how the study, my impression of how the study was done. Erika sent me a couple of headlines, and from that I inferred like how the study was done, and I can tell you how I think the study was done, and I think why people are confused about stuff, why you're confused about stuff, and where all this came from. Like, it's actually pretty simple. So, and I'll try to maybe I even do a demo for you so that you can see how like a more like intuitive way of thinking about it. Let me share my screen with you. We'll use a Jamboard again. All right, so one of the things that we were talking about before is like a local alignment is an alignment that exists in a space. Like, here's one sequence, here's another sequence, and it could be anything. It could be just text. This could be like, just a random text. This is random text, and whatever. So if it's the same piece of text in both of these things, like if you were to write out some words over here, hello there, then there would be an alignment between the like this. What you'll notice about this is that what we call the major diagonal, that's this part right here. And that aligns this H with this H, this E, this L's. There's an alignment, or each part here connects to this other part. That's where the alignment exists. And that's the part that's 100% identical when you compare two things that are the same. And when you run BLAST, those complexity filters, those can mess things up, of course. But that's not what we're going to talk about right now. But you'll also notice that HE is also right here. HE, you see this? HE? That also forms a diagonal. The H is similar to the H, and the E is the same as the E. Okay? And that HE also exists over here. That's here and it's here. So that when you do an alignment, even to something that it's itself, in addition to the major diagonal, which is 100% identical, and it's not only 100% identical, it's also 100% the length of the sequence. However long this is, that's how long your alignment is. When you put them together and you make an alignment, it'll look like this. And they'll be just right on top of each other. Like those things are right on top of each other. Like that they're both the same length. This alignment is the same length as either one of the sequences and sequence cell. In addition to that alignment, you get other alignments. Like he aligned to he. Additional, we call this the maximum scoring alignment, or maximum scoring pair. But these things are called high scoring pairs if they match certain criteria. So this alignment that we get here is off the major diagonal. It's a similarity elsewhere in the text.
Right. The BLAST program, though, puts the 100% one at the top, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it gives you these other ones too.
Right.
Yes, good. I'm glad you understand all this stuff. Okay, so let's imagine a different study in which I take, for example, this long chromosome. Could be of any organism, whatever else, doesn't really matter. It could even be to itself. We can take this organism and compare it to itself, okay? And if we do that, we're going to see, if it's really long, this big, long search space. In addition to this major diagonal of similarities, there's going to be lots of other similarities that are hanging out in here. In fact, I can take two completely unrelated sequences. These sequences have no relation in common. I can actually make them random. I can make a random sequence. Literally, I could just have my computer generate random DNA, and there will be alignments in this search space where letters, just randomly, this letter is the exact same thing as this letter, just like I was just showing you. These could be, and this is random. This happens with totally random sequences. You can get alignments. What is the quality? What is the properties of these alignments? They tend to be kind of short, okay? And they tend to have mismatches in them. And the number of mismatches that you get, like the percent identity of these alignments, these random stuff that happen, depend on your match and mismatch parameters. So BLAST, has these you get a reward of like, oh, I'm gonna get a reward of +1 if the letters are the same. And maybe I'll get a penalty of -1 if they're different. Well, that scoring parameter will give you something very different than +1 -2. Or +1 -3. These end up with different kinds of percent identities. So if you do something like this, you might end up with something like 75% identity. If you do something like this, you end up with like 85%, 90% identity. This one's like 99% identity or something. Get different things here. So what happens is, this is the properties of random sequence. When you do random sequences, there are alignments in the space that are random. In addition to the stuff that happens that's supposed to happen along the major diagonal. So let's imagine that we compare now two chromosomes to each other. In addition, let's imagine it's human chimp or whatever. I don't care what it is. Okay? There is a major diagonal along the two of them that says these two things are very similar to each other. We could be doing this biblically. This could be the King James Version of the Bible, and this could be the American Bible Union or whatever, ABA or whatever it is. There's different versions of the Bible, right? If you were to align them to each other, they're mostly the same. Like there's a couple different words here and there, but they're basically the same. However, in addition to the main text, there's a whole bunch of other stuff out here that's also similar. There are similar phrases that show up in texts of various kinds, whether they be literature, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, fantasy kind of stuff that people read, the Bible, genomes. There are phrases that where the part of this one is similar to this one, but they're not along the major diagonal. I'm not comparing the same paragraph to the same paragraph. I'm comparing something in chapter 1 to something over here that's in chapter 10. Should I be comparing those things? Like, do you really want to compare those? Because these things are short phrases that are similar to each other, and their percent identities are like low. Crap. This is basically random. This is what's going to happen, is that if you align random sequences, you will get lots of extra alignments that have nothing to do with the thing that have not, these are random, it has nothing to do with anything. And if you do an alignment between two genomic sequences, or two, we can do this with literature, with actual text from books. I could show you there's a text of books. We can find, yes, the text aligns to itself or related versions of itself very well, but off the diagonal, there will be a lot of random similarities that look nothing alike, really.
Okay.
And this what appears to me to be the problem with the study that I saw, is that instead of comparing only the parts that are actually in a row, there's comparisons that are being made between different parts of the text. And so you're polluting the main message here with all this other stuff around here. And these things should never have been compared. You're comparing things that aren't even in the right place. It's like comparing something in chapter 1 to chapter 10. It's like, well, of course they're not the same. They're different chapters.
Are you familiar with contiguous DNA sequences?
Of course I know what contigs are.
Okay. Well, that's what Tompkins is
Yeah, so
studying.
yeah, right. I understand what he's done. He's broken up pieces like this into effectively different chapters. And he's compared those different chapters, let's say, to the human genome. Well, you don't have any, you're not allowed, like, it makes sense to compare these chapters. It doesn't make sense to compare that chapter to over here. And that's what he's done. He's compared stuff out of the context of where it's being compared. He's compared things in completely different places. And these alignments over here are like 80% or 70% or whatever it is, and they're short and they're low percent identity. These alignments are going to be, if they're in the correct order to this one, are going to be like 99% the same. And these ones out here are just random similarities. And if you include this, it's going to make it look like these things aren't related to each other, but they are along the major point. They really are the same. If you do this, I can do an example of this with you, with the Bible, if you would like, where I could cut the Bible into pieces and compare it to itself. And there will be places where the Bible compared to itself doesn't look anything like it. Along the major diagonal, it will be 100% identical. If I compare King James to ABU, it'll be 99% identical along the major diagonal. And off the major diagonal, there'll be all these other similarities. They're like 30% the same. And it's like, they didn't belong anywhere in the study.
All right, Tompkins is actually working off of the data from another evolutionist, and he's taking that study and he's breaking it down to see what he would get the results of.
Yeah, he's messed up. He's messed up because he's including the stuff out here. This is the problem. I've seen his blast parameters, and he's including the stuff out here. This is the problem, is that the design of the experiment from the beginning didn't say the only things that we're going to control, compare are the things that have the same synteny. They're in the same order on the chromosomes. If you compare them to other places, it doesn't really make any sense. I don't know if I'm not sure you're appreciating the problem here, but he's basically comparing random regions of the genome and then saying there's something about these that aren't similar to each other. Of course they're not similar. They're not even related to each other. These are like random similarities in text.
From what I gather, in order to not introduce bias in there, you're supposed to look for random sequences.
Yeah, I can show you what random looks. Do you want to know I can show you what random looks like.
Okay.
Yeah, and and what he's finding is effectively just random. And when you do this kind of a blast search, okay, when you just do random sequences against each other, you can make up totally random sequences. And if you do them with a certain types of parameters on them, you will get alignments that average 75% identity. If you change your alignment parameters, you will average a different percent identity with random sequences. This has nothing to do with how related these sequences. It's everything to do with just, if you take a body of a whole bunch of text, there will be some letters that are similar to other patterns, like some phrases of letters that are going to be similar to each other by chance. And depending on the scoring mechanisms that they use, those percent identities will be very different from each other.
What I'm asking specifically is, are 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 you saying that we have to specifically choose the sequences and then compare those sequences, or are you saying that trying to look at this from the point of view of a random search is wrong? I mean, I'm trying to
No, I think
clarify what you're saying.
there's nothing wrong with including randomness in your model if you understand how to do that randomness. If you actually, it doesn't, you can have randomness as part of it. Sure, randomness is an important part of everything. Like, if you don't know what happens at random, then what are you going to do? And I'm telling you, I know I can show you what happens at random. When you take random sequences, you get alignments that have percent identities. They're going to be 75, 80% at random. That's what random background looks like. So when you go and align sequences together, not only will you get the things, like I'm just telling you, like if you align a sequence to itself, yes, you will get some things that are 100% identical. You will also get a whole bunch of stuff that is not 100% identical, just at random. This is the fact. Okay? This is the random background. If you choose this, are you biasing it? You're biasing it to the things that you think, oh yes, this is what happens. But if you ignore what the random background is supposed to be, you're also not doing your job. Like, that's even a worse kind of bias. It's like you didn't recognize that there was this random background. This is the problem. Do the other geneticists understand that there's a random background of alignments that are going to happen no matter what you do? And how have they taken that into account? Well, it turns out these random alignments not only have low percent identities, but they also have low e-values in terms of blast statistics. And if you
What's
were to
that called,
fit
the e-value? I've seen that before, but I've never understood that particular thing.
and yet it's essential to understand what e-value is. The
What is
e-value
it?
says, okay, let's talk about the e-value. The e-value says that if you have a search space of a particular size, okay, and you have an alignment in this search space, here's an alignment in that search space, and it has a score, and the score is like, oh, the score is equal to 15. Like, you've seen the scores in a blast report, right? And they have a number like a 15 on them. Well, the e-value tells you how often you're expected to see that score of that kind in the search space. And the Carlin-Alschel equation, AMN e to the minus lambda s, looks like this. The score that we're talking about, this score right here, is the s in this equation. And if you go through this equation, it's just relatively simple, but there's this exponent of kind of interesting thing. It tells you how many alignments you would have seen at random. They're just going to show up at random in this search space. And that's what the e-value tells you. So when you get an alignment with an e-value of 1 or 2 or 3, it's like that's entirely 100% expected at random. And when I looked at the blast parameters, Erika showed me some blast parameters. She said, oh, this was a study, and I looked at the blast parameters, and the e-value was 10. Okay, let's figure out the actual, what was happening. These things out here, these random things that I'm saying exist, all have very high e-values. They happen at random. These are random alignments. You should have removed the ones that are random alignments. You can just look at the thing, and it tells you what's, the blast statistics tells you what random looks like. That's what this is. It tells you what random looks like. And the default blast parameters have an e-value of 10, which is showing you what some really, really random stuff looks like. Even if e-value of 0.1 isn't very, like people who use blast on an ordinary basis set their e-values to extremely low things. Like 1 in a billion isn't even a very low, like they might do it like 1e minus 20. And the experiments that have been done had blast like e-values of 10 and 0.1, which means it's riddled with all of these extra alignments that are random. And blast knows they're random. That's why they're giving you the e-value. They're telling you it's garbage. And if these alignments are being included in the analysis, you've included garbage in the analysis. And I believe, I don't even have any idea really exactly what it is, but when I saw the blast, command line, I was like, oh my God, please no, don't do that. Because what it'll do, it'll make all of this stuff will take over from the stuff that's interesting. You don't have to cherry pick and say, I'm going to align these things, but you do it and like choose things, right? Like, well, Carter was like, you don't want to do this thing because then you're biasing. Well, you have to recognize what the random looks like and remove the random from the study. And that's in the e-value.
Well,
And
let me
you have
ask
to
you a
set up
question.
what?
Her focus on the parameters was not on the e-value at all.
It should have been.
She
Should have been.
focused
That was
on
the thing.
she focused on the gapped and ungapped parameters.
Doesn't matter. Probably doesn't matter. You're going to get the same. When you're doing alignments, okay, of self to self, or things that are really related to each other, okay, like human and chimp, unfortunately, they really are, really related to each other.
No, chimp and humans are not related to each other. That just assumes his evolutionary assumption. I should point that out. Now, you could say that chimps and humans are really similar. How similar? I don't know how similar they are. Because you'd have to factor in all those differences that are being ignored by algorithms that only look for similarities and so forth. And I think there's a significant amount. And so, but I don't know exactly how much. Plus, you have to have a telomere to telomere sequence in the chimp genome to fully sequenced. And we don't have that yet to know precisely. But in any given case, you could say that they're similar, but that's not the same as saying they're related. By him saying they're related, he's actually arguing in a circle. He's assuming his position first, which we're both going to assume our position. But when he assumes his position in a way that seems to argue, oh, well, if they're similar, then they must be related. And so they're really related as a result. No, that's your evolutionary assumptions. Okay, that's what it comes down to. Obviously, I don't agree with that. That's completely wrong, completely false. There's no evidence at all for it. Proving similarities does not prove relationship. All right, that's the bottom line. You can prove two things are really similar. That doesn't make them related. Fork and spoon are very similar to each other. They're both used as eating utensils. Their shape is similar except for the four prongs on the fork, but other than that, they got similar features, so they're really similar to each other. They're probably far more similar to each other than a knife is to a fork, and yet you can use both a knife and a fork to stab, where you can't use a spoon to stab. But yeah, a knife and fork are not more similar than a spoon and a fork. But similarity doesn't really prove relationship. It doesn't really prove that they're related or that they evolve one from another. And sometimes evolutionists will pounce on this kind of analogy and they'll say, well, that's not an organism. They don't interbreed. That's completely irrelevant. That's called the fallacy of irrelevant thesis. That's completely irrelevant whether they breed or not. The point of the analogy is that similarity does not prove relationship. Even if they're organic, even if it's genetic, you can have genetic similarity between two things that are related, but you can also have genetic similarity between two things that are not related. Simply put, the point that I'm making is that genetic similarity does not prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that something is related. You can, some people say that every person has a twin. Now they don't really mean that in exactness. Obviously, we're going to have our unique qualities, but there's somebody in the world somewhere that's going to, because of the billions of people that exist in the world, that's going to look very much like me. It's going to look very similar to me. Maybe have the same cheekbones, maybe same beard structure, whatever the case may be. And they're going to look very similar to me. Maybe even have the same color hair. That's what they mean by twin. But that doesn't mean that they're related to me. I've got a lot of people. There are people, when I first came to this town, there were people with the same last name as me. The fact they have the same last name doesn't prove they're related to me, right? So, similarities doesn't prove relationship. But evolutionists often promote that idea that similarities prove relationships and therefore that they must be related. What Dr. Ian Korf could mean in this situation is that chimps and humans are really related, which is probably what he really meant. But because he assumes relationship or similarity means relationship, that they're related to each other, he assumes if they're really similar, then they must be really related. No, that doesn't mean that at all. It just means they're really similar. That's all it means. How similar, I don't know, but they're probably very similar. That doesn't prove relationship at all. 100% does not prove relationship. So that's just his biasm kind of coming through, circle of reasoning and so forth. But in no way does that prove a relationship as a result. You could argue for similarity, which is probably what he really meant. But because he assumes one is true of the other, then he assumes that they must be related because they're similar. But similarity doesn't prove relationship.
When you compare those kinds of things, okay, the gapping and the ungapping doesn't matter at all. Extension doesn't matter. X drop off, all this stuff. None of those things matter. They're so similar they don't matter. All you're getting is a different constellation of extra garbage. That's the difference. When you run gapped or ungapped, these kinds of the flavor of the extra stuff is a little different, but it's still garbage, and you would still filter it off with the e-value. All of this stuff should be removed at the point of e-value. Now, none of this has to do with the alignment specifics. Like, we've been talking a lot about alignment specifics. I think it's actually really cool that you bought my book and you're interested in the how the algorithm works and other stuff like that. That's cool. But that's not the problem with the study. The problem with the study is all the way back at the beginning of it, of things like, I'm going to cut this up into pieces or whatever that has been done, and then not recognizing that there would be.
Isn't that how a lot of geneticists do it though? Cut they segment the results off.
Why they segment it?
Because you can't do a whole genomic comparison with BLAST. It's a basic local alignment.
No, well, you can do it. It'll make its own local alignment. It's actually because of the amount of memory it takes in the computer. That's the reason why. So we segment it into multiple pieces, because then we can send these off to different CPUs. If you have a lot of CPUs in your machine, you can make it a lot more efficient by having smaller pieces that you do stuff with.
Another note added in post. I am so glad that he brought up the fact that the efficiency of using better equipment and memory, because one of the things that Erika pounced on my Tompkins interview was that me and Tompkins talked about the fact he had better resources than Erika did. Now, it is true that Erika still can replicate method possibly using smaller scale stuff, although probably not quite as good. But there's always a possibility they could. But with the equipment, the idea wasn't just the speed. One of the things she said was, oh, that just makes it faster. It don't just make it faster, although that's true, but it's not the only thing it does. It makes it more efficient. You got better memory and things like that, and so you can store more information. You could do a much more robust sampling of the genome. I think Dr. Korf does talk about that. He might talk about that in the next clip that I got of him. But in any given case, you can do a much more robust sampling of that and be able to come up with a pretty good study concerning that particular genetic study, and you could be able to come up with a very good study as a result of that. Now, I'm not saying that you can't do a study on a much smaller scale. You can, but it's going to be extremely limited. And so this was a very minor point that was made in the video. She pounced on it. It wasn't a major point, and it wasn't against self-to-self either. It was on just her trying to replicate Tompkins' method in the first place. But it was a very minor point, especially when compared to all the other errors that was found out that she had committed since then, that's been exposed publicly. So this was a very, very minor point, but I think the point still stands. I think that if you have a better equipment, you can do a much more efficient study. That does not necessarily mean that you have to do that in order to do any kind of study in relationship to it. You could probably do a study at a much smaller scale, the way Carter did, the way Erika did, and the way I did. I mean, you could do, which mine wasn't really anything major. It was just basically to illustrate certain points. but you could do something like that. But it's not exactly the same as what Tompkins had access to. That's the point. That was the point of the statement. It wasn't to say, hey, look, Tompkins had all these fancy equipment. He has a bigger computer than you, so haha, that sort of thing. That wasn't the point of it. The point of it was just simply to make a point about the fact that if you're going to do this at a much smaller scale, then you're going to have to work off those limitations and acknowledge those limitations are there. And it's not just a question of speed, it's also a question of efficiency. Again, this is a minor point. It's not anything significant or major. I wouldn't use it as something that I would die on that hill and say there it is. And there's a whole host of other issues that I have with what Erika did, and so they're probably much bigger than that, way much bigger than that. But that was the point that was being made, and that's something that Erika pounced on. And so I'm glad that Korf did bring up that the efficiency, better memory and things like that. And of course, Tompkins is using a much powerful server as well, Linux server. Windows, it can do a good job, but it's mostly designed for multitasking. So it's like its focus is on doing doing multiple jobs at the same time. Whereas a Linux server is doing one job at one given time, but does it really, really well. So it's much more efficient server. And I've heard others say, Dr. Korf might have said it. I can't remember who said it, but someone said that doing it under a Linux server is better. And as far as Blast goes, I don't have that access to that service, but my understanding that it would be better to actually run these kinds of experiments with Blast using a Linux server. And so it's not just about speed, Erika. It's also about efficiency, and that's the point that was made. It's a very minor point, very minor, especially considering all the other errors that's been exposed on your study and your methods. But it is what it is. It is a point, but it is not all about speed. It's also about efficiency. I just wanted to add that in just to kind of point that out, since it was brought up by Erika in her response video to my Tompkins interview. And so that was my response to Erika on that.
So, can I ask you a question on the, a lot of people say that there are problems associated with Blast. A lot of people are like, for example, its inability to be able to, like, if you have a large area of the genome that is dissimilar, then it tends to want to skip over that. Is that true? I mean, have you come across that problem?
If things are dissimilar from each other, it's not. There's no local similarity to them. There's no alignment there. Of course, it would skip over. It's not designed to find.
It skips over. So how do you factor that into Blast? I mean, how do you figure out, like, okay, it's
has nothing to do with Blast. That has to do with your study, not have to do with Blast. Blast is designed.
So you'd have to go in and look into the data.
Yeah, you would have to say, well, what are the areas of the genome that don't align? Like, if I was, if you're interested in the human genome, lots of people are interested in the unique parts of the human genome. Let's just imagine this is the human genome, and you were to compare this to all sorts of other genomes. You would say, hey, you know what? There's this region right around here that's in the human genome that's not in any other genome. And there's a region around here that's in the human genome that's not in any other genome. Lots of people are interested in these kinds of things. Are they creationists? Maybe, maybe not. They're uniquely interesting things because they're part of the human genome that isn't anywhere else. You don't have to be a creationist to be interested in saying what makes people human. And there's unique, interesting areas of the genome that are like this. Will you find them with Blast? No, because they're unique. They're unique to the humans. They're not in the other stuff. So if you go to align this and align it to every other organism on the planet, you find all sorts of alignments out here. Oh, look, it's similar to this and this. All these things are similar out here, whatever. The parts you don't find are the unique parts. Like, why not design a study? If you're interested in saying, how cool is a human genome, you should be looking at the parts that don't align, not the parts that do align. Like, why would you look at the human and chimp stuff? It's like people already looked at that. It's like it's almost identical. It's not even very interesting. The things that makes us interestingly maybe some of the things that make us uniquely human are some of these things that aren't anything else. So I don't know. It seems like this like if you're going to use blast to do something interesting, what you kind of want to do is use blast to find out all the stuff that's similar and ignore it, and then focus on the other stuff that's interestingly different, maybe.
I agree that Tompkins made some mistakes, and there were probably issues. I think everybody made mistakes with blast. I mean,
yeah.
Is it your opinion that there's a lot of people that don't really understand the program very well, even geneticists?
Yeah, well, most people just use it with the default parameters. If you go to blast, you just say like, I'm just going to use the default parameters for this thing. It's like there's like so many dials and switches to move around.
Yeah. That's what Erika did. Use the default parameters. But
they generally work for most people. They've designed the default parameters to be generally useful. But if you're trying to do like a very specific experiment, you will change them. Like I don't know exactly what Erika did, but yeah.
Making a statement from your book, you said that sometimes default parameters are appropriate and sometimes they're not.
Yeah, right. But I don't know what Erika did. She didn't show me her blast.
Of course not.
She didn't tell me her parameters. Well, it was a short email. She just made me a short email and said, look, this is the situation. And that things like, there's some things that are expected to happen at random.
All right. Let me explain an e-value. Basically, an e-value is it basically reduces random background noise. What background noise is basically, it's how often you're likely to find the same alignment or similar at random. And the rule of thumb with the e-value is the closer you get to zero, the better. He made some statements that doesn't make sense to me, like 1 in a billion or something like that. That's not how e-values are set. So I don't understand why he said it that way. The way they usually get set is like 1.0 or 0.01 or 0.00001, whatever. And you're supposed to get as close as possible to zero as you can. You can't set the e-value to zero. We're gonna explore that a little bit, e-value on that. But before I show that, the object of e-value is to reduce that randomness, to prevent random noises. As I already mentioned, he just kind of thought that Tompkins was combining all of the. Now he might hold today or claim right now specific papers or whatever, but he's not even doing those for those papers either. So because he's taking the best alignment, so he's not taking a total of the search results. All those sequences that are not wouldn't be 100% identical if you self to self. He's not taking any of those. He's taking the highest scoring hit, and so he is actually going along that major diagonal. The best alignment, which is on the major diagonal against itself, will always be 100%. We're gonna cover that. I'm gonna show you some blast results using the e-value, just to kind of give you an idea of different e-values and what its effect on sequences and randomness and that sort of thing. And we'll jump right into that, and we'll continue forward. Okay, here I got the same sequence that Carter has sent me. Now I am going to use blast in. Okay, I'm not gonna use any masking. Okay, Tompkins usually use the e-value of 0.1. We'll use that for this. And then I'll show you other e-values too. This right here, expect threshold, is where we set the e-value. Normally the e-value is set on the online version is at least 0.5. I believe he told me at some point, I'm not sure if it was this conversation or a different conversation, but I think he said the e-value is normally 0.10. I don't know if it depends on the version of Blast you do, but the one on the online version, it's 0.5. But Tompkins usually use 0.1, and that's what he used in his 2018 paper and his 2016 paper. So that's what we're going to use here. He used it as one of the 5 e-values that he evaluated in his 2011 paper. So we're going to use that. I'm not sure if it's the one he used on his 2013 and 2015 paper, maybe. But anyway, we're going to use this. And I think actually he might have used Korf mentioned that he used e-value 10. There was only a couple papers he used that. One of them was the 2011 paper where he had 5 different e-values, and one of them was 10. Another one, 0.1. He had one that was really bad. It was like 1,000. I can't believe he used the e-value of 1,000. But the earliest one he used in 2011 was my favorite e-value, 0.00001. That's really low e-value. That's where you would probably want to keep it. But Tompkins has used the e-value 0.1, which I think Korf also has a problem with. But based on what I found on like NCBI's website and things like that, this is supposedly appropriate to use. So it's nothing that I couldn't find anything that said this was a bad e-value. It would probably depend on what your sequences, how big of sequences you're looking at, and that sort of thing. And Tompkins is at least his 2018 paper. If you look at the data, they go anywhere from 30 base pairs long all the way up to over 2 million. So whether this is a good e-value or not could depend on where we are in his evaluating his 18,000 contigs. But in any case, we're going to use that. Word size 11 is usually default. We'll use that. We'll go ahead and keep all these the same. But we're not going to use any masking because Tompkins didn't use any masking. All right. And we'll probably try this mask too, just to see what the results would be. All right. So actually, let's use mask. I changed my mind. Let's use mask. Why would I want to use mask? For one simple reason, because we don't need that. Because I don't want this to interfere with it. I want you to be able to see what the results of the e-value alone is. So I want to make sure that masking doesn't impact what we're seeing here, so we can see what the effect is of the different e-values. All right, so let's blast it. All right, go to alignments. All right, we see here the first alignment is 100%. 100% alignment on the best alignment. You see the e-value is 0.0. It's not 0.15 or anything like that. It's 0.0. That's the best alignment. That's what he took. Okay, we go to the next match. The next match is also 100%. Okay. Let's go to the next match. 100%. Okay, so if you don't mask it, yeah, it'll always be 100% on the alignments. Okay, good. That shows that okay, the issue would be masking it. Watch when I unmask it. Take a little longer. Okay, let's go back to alignments. Okay, again, the best alignment is 100%, which is what we expect. See? All right, now let's go to the next match. What? It's not 100%. Right, when we did the e-value, 100% all the way down, right? masking, but it's only when we did the unmasking that we start seeing less than 100%. The E value didn't affect it much. Not here. Not with using that E value. We're going to use a higher E value just to kind of see where we're at now. All right, and again, we're going to use masking. Use soft masking. All right, we're going to go up here, change the E value. Let's use the E value 0. Let's use 10. Let's use 10 as our E value. Let's see what we come up with. Okay. Again, best alignment, 100%. We expect that. Okay, no matter what the situation is, the best alignment is always going 100% because the E value of that is going to be 0.0. Okay, there's no randomness in the best alignment. That's along the major diagonal. Now let's go to the next match. Again, 100%. Even though I used the E value of 10, 100%. Okay, let's go to the next match. 100%. Next match. 100%. Next match. 100%. Next match. 100%. Wow. All right. Okay. Now let's try no masking. Like that. And same E value. Take a little longer because we're not masking the repetitive elements. Okay, go to alignments. Okay, 100% best alignment. Again, we expect that. All right, go to the next match. Again, 96%. Next match. The E value here is not affecting it as much. All right, at least not in this particular sequence. Again, it depends on the size of the sequence. All right, so all right, I'm gonna try something really big. We'll go try 1,000. Yeah, there you go, 1,000. That was one of the 5 E values in his 2011 paper. So let's check this out. Okay. Again, we expect best alignment 100%. Okay, let's check next match. Also at 100%. 100%. Now keep in mind though that the E value is going to do better affect something that's larger because there's more alignments that can be caused by something that is a larger sequence. The sequence we're using here is not very big, and that's the reason why, even though 1,000 is technically a very high E value, it's not going to impact our result much here. So we'll probably see if we can use something a little longer than the sequence that Carter had sent me. Yeah, let's use no masking. Again, a little longer to process. Again, we expect 100%. But then we go next match. 96%. All right. All right. Let's test. Let's do a different sequence here. All right. We got here one of the genes that I downloaded, got it against itself. Okay, we're going to use blast in. Let's look at the algorithm. Okay, we're going to change this to 1,000. Okay, we'll keep the word size the same. to keep all this the same. We're going to do it masking initially, and we're going to show results in a different window. All right, let's see what we got. Okay, alignments. Again, we expect best alignment still 100%. Okay, next match. Uh-oh. 83%. Then why is this at 83%? Because it's randomly choosing this alignment. It's no longer 100% even with masking. You have a high enough E value and it actually affects the results and creates random sequences. Now, is that what Tompkins' issue is? No. I think there might be some randomness in there as a result of his E value. The rule of thumb, you might have some randomness in most cases, but the rule of thumb is to try to reduce down the random background noise as much as possible. So the rule of thumb has always been to get it as close to 0 as possible. And if you do 1,000, well, as you can see, there's some random sequences there. Now we're going to test it using a different E value too. Let's test it using 10. See what we can come up with. Okay, let's go alignment, skin, best alignment, still 100%, what we expect, right? All right, the next match, okay, still 83%. Okay, next match, 3%. Okay, yeah. So in spite of the fact that this is masking, it's actually affecting the net results. I think in his 2011 paper, I think he said something to the effect of he didn't see that much difference between 10 and 1,000. I can concur with that. All right, now let's try it without any masking, and then we'll test 1,000. Let's see where it happens. Okay, alignments. Okay, again, 100%. We expect that. All right, next match. Also 83%. Despite I have masking. Next match. 83%. Next match. 74%. It's getting lower as we move forward. Next match. Also 74%. Next match. 74. Next match. Oops. Next match. 83%. Ooh. It went up a little bit. But anyway, that's what we expect at random. All right. Let's try another E value. Let's try my favorite E value. I don't want to leave this without doing my favorite E value. That's my favorite E value. It's really, really low E value. So let's see what we would expect on that. 100%, what we expect. Next match. Also 83%. Next match. 83%. 74%. 74% right here. Now let's try it without the masking. Again, we expect this 100% best alignment. Next match. 83%. Next match, 83%. Next match, 74%. And it goes down the line, actually. You can probably go all the way down to all these different matches. See the results there. And I think the score that he was talking about in the presentation is right here. So go back to the first match. This score right here. This is going to always be the highest scoring alignment. Always. So this is the highest score. So if you go to the next match, the score is lower. Go to the next match. Score is even lower. Next match, score is lower. It always goes like that from the top match on. Tompkins is taking the best alignment, therefore he's not taking any of these low scores. He's taking only the highest scoring hit is what he's taking. And that is not being factored in by either Korf or Erika. Now, Korf later tried to amend that by saying he just talked about specific papers, but that's not what he said during the course part conversation. He made general statements about Tompkins' study. We'll see some of that in a little bit when we talk about controls. So, yeah, that's the gist of that E values. But the closer you get to 0, the better it is. I didn't actually test 0. I want to show you what it looks like if I do 0. We'll see what it looks like when I do 0. Okay, we'll blast that. We'll blast it with masking. Okay. And then we'll do without mask. Oh, error. Error. Cannot validate the blast options. Expect value or cutoff score must be greater than 0. So in case if you ever want to know, can I do 0? If you got to get close to 0, no. I don't know the reason why. I'm sure there's a reason behind it. Perhaps Dr. Ian Korf would know the reason why you can't do 0. But some reason Blast will not let you do 0. And it doesn't matter whether you use masking or unmasking. The result's going to be the same. It's going to be that error message. That's the reason why you can't use 0. In case anyone wants to know, can you use 0? The answer is no, you can't. All right. I just wanted to show you that real quickly. So essentially, the E value will, the closer you get to 0, the less randomness you're going to have in your search result. And of course, it's going to depend on the size of your sequences, depending on whether something is, and obviously Korf has certain opinions about the E value and that sort of thing. Now, just to be clear, he doesn't think this is the major problem in Tompkins' study. At least that's what he told me, because he changed his mind from that to the masking issue, which again, Dr. Korf pointed me in the right direction. Probably not meant to the application that I ended up applying to, because I think that Korf misunderstood Tompkins' research, and it's clear from here that he's also misunderstanding it, because again, like I said, he doesn't take this position anymore. But in the video that you just saw, he seemed to be assuming that the that all of the random sequences were somehow that he's taken these other things, like he's comparing one chapter against another chapter on the other side of the genome and things like that, and he's not actually doing that. What he's actually doing is he's taking the best alignment. He's taking the highest scoring hit. The highest scoring hit will always be along the major diagonal. It's a 1-to-1 match. It's the closest, and as you already saw, it's Expected threshold, it's an expected value, e-value, is actually 0.0. So there's no randomness involved in the highest scoring hit. In fact, several high scoring hits, you saw that the expect value was 0.0. So these are not random hits on the highest scoring hits. Particularly the highest one, definitely not. It's always 0.0 on the e-value. So it's not random. It is actually along the major diagonal. So if you take the best alignment and you compare it against itself, it will always be 100%. This leads us into something that is a constant objection that many critics in this discussion have brought up and claimed. And one of them is, and this is claimed both by Erika and Korf. Erika is the main one that brings it up, but she's not the first one to bring it up. The first one to bring it up is Swamidas. I don't know why, but all the objections in this controversy always go back to Swamidas, which is kind of surprising since Swamidas is not really a major voice in this controversy, at least not at present. He might have said some stuff within the controversy and that sort of thing, but he isn't like a big voice into it. But yet, all the arguments, if you trace them back far enough, they always go back to Swamidas, back to Joshua Swamidas. I don't know why. I don't know how. I don't know how that happened, but somehow it does. Like for example, Ruhif's argument on weighted averages argument that he used in his video, where he that Erika's piggybacking off of in her arguments against him on not weighting his averages and stuff like that. We'll talk more about that later, probably when we do the method video that we'll be ending the series with. But in any case, he brings that up, and in the course of that video, at the beginning of the video, he says he gets gets pointed to this math argument from two sources, one which was unknown. The other was Dr. Joshua Swamidas. It's like, how in the world does it always come back down to Dr. Joshua Swamidas as the origin of these arguments? But some reason they do. And of course, Swamidas is actually the one who originally came up with the idea of allegedly of Tompkins not using controls and things like that. He's the one who first came up with the accusation, and then Erika kind of took it and ran with it and promoted it and popularized the objection, that sort of thing. And Korf has a similar objection, which we're going to be going into here in a second. But first, before we see Korf's comments, let's see Erika's. I'm thinking, should I show Swamidas? Yeah. Let's look at Swamidas first. Let's look at what he put in his blog on the subject matter. All right, we're here at Swamidas's article, and he's responding to Tompkins' 2016 paper on 101 chimpanzee trace read datasets. All right. And he says he wrote it elsewhere. It says, so what about Tompkins' work? He said, very familiar with his work. Tompkins seems like a nice guy, but his study is deeply flawed. The data is freely available and reproducing his work for fun. I found he made some large errors by excluding some basic controls. Okay, he's the first one who accused Tompkins of not doing certain basic controls. All right, including the controls, we find the human chimp reads similarity is about 98%. For comparison, that's not exactly true. You can actually, if you took all the regions of the genome that the algorithm does not actually figure out, because it actually skips over the algorithm. You notice in the video that y'all got through watching, I did ask him about that, it actually skips over the areas that are dissimilar. So if you have a lot of area that's dissimilar, it's going to skip over it. The algorithm is not going to pick it up at all. And so that's a large scale amount of information that has to be factored back in. What usually ends up happening is that the evolutionists will ignore this information entirely and not factor it back in. And one of the things I like about Dr. Richard Bugg's study is that he took this information that was being ignored and factored it back in. He recalculated it back in, which is what you should do, what you should do on that. But unfortunately, a lot of evolutionists don't do that. They just ignore the amount of information that's being ignored. So if you see results like 98% similar, which you automatically assume, oh, we're 98% similar and 2% different. And if you look at the difference between chimps and humans, you realize there's a lot of more differences than that 2%. What's going on here? What's going on here is that we're not actually 2% different. We're actually a lot more different, and and this also means that we are also a lot less similar than what is being reported, because we're only 98% similar if you take out all the differences and stuff like that, or the majority of differences that are in our genome. Once you factor them back in, you create a larger sequence. But much of the additional sequence that's being added now or factored back in are differences, not similarities. And so once you do that, the numbers actually go down significantly. And that's a huge issue right there. So it doesn't come out to not 98%. And by the way, a lot of evolutionists today don't take the 98% number. Swami Das appears to take, at least in 2016, I guess this is 2016? 2019 is when he's making this paper, or making this article. It's not a paper, but he's making this article, and most evolutionists, I think, takes the 96% number. A lot of them take 96%. I think Erika has promoted the 96% number. So this 98% is kind of outdated anyhow among evolutionists. I know that Dr. Korf took 98% as well, but it's not a popular number as much as it used to be. 96% has actually gotten popular among evolutionists now. But anyway, so this 98% number might actually be out of date anyhow, even among evolutionists. But there's actually a lot more differences between humans and chimps than that. For comparison, the similarity of mice and rats is about 80%. Okay. Now, in the clip you're about to watch here in a little bit, that Korf talks, he says that Erika had done mice and rats, which is not true. She didn't do mouse and rats. She never did mice and rats. She relied on Swami Das because he did mice and rats, allegedly. Now, we're going to talk, I'm going to evaluate what he says here in a little bit. But let's continue reading. He says about 80%. Mice and rats are the same kind. Seems that humans and chimps are two. Now, this right here is implying a strawman argument. Erika does the same thing. I'm going to deal with that maybe in my next video. I'm planning on doing a video called Erika versus Created Kinds. She made a recent video on Created Kinds. She doesn't understand what we actually believe on the subject matter. It appears Swami Das doesn't either. To us, it's not about how much the two organisms are similar or dissimilar. It's the kinds of similarity or dissimilarity that they have, the way in which they are similar or dissimilar. It's not about how much they are similar or dissimilar. It's not about the amount of similarity or dissimilarity. And now evolutionists might think that, but that's not our position. If you're going to attack our position, you have to attack it on its own merit. Otherwise, you're just making a strawman argument, which is exactly what he's doing here. He's making a strawman argument or implying one. It would not logically factor in if two organisms are the same kind. Because they have so much in agreement, like a certain amount of agreement. Let's say that the 80% number is correct and they're like 80% similar or 85% similar or whatever. And then they say, oh, well, humans and chimps are more similar than rats and mice. Now, I question that result, but let's just say that that's true. Let's for the sake of argument, and I don't want no debates on it, because I'm saying I'm going to grant you that for the sake of argument. Does that mean humans and chimps are the same kind? No, it does not. It actually does not mean that at all, because what makes humans and chimps different from each other could be fundamental in distinguishing chimps from humans. Whereas what makes rats and mice the same kind could be fundamental in understanding that they are the same kind. It's the way in which they are similar or dissimilar that either makes them the same kind or distinguishes them from each other. So the amount of similarity or dissimilarity is not a factor. And that is the YAC position. Now, we might argue it differently. We might say it differently. We may word it differently. But it always comes down to that. It's the kinds of similarity or dissimilarities that we're looking at. This is also one of the key issues in this debate of evolution, because evolution always makes it look like it's about change. It's not about change. If it's about change, nobody would disagree. We'd all agree that organisms change over time. The issue is not that organisms change over time, the kinds of changes that actually occur. And young Earth creationists have corrected evolutionists on this many, 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 many times. Over and over and over again, we've corrected y'all on it. So, but y'all keep on making the same strawman argument. So this is implying the same strawman argument. Erika does repeat it. We'll get into that probably maybe my next video on the Tompkins controversy. Now let's go further. He says, I could show you his error if you are interested. He said, I would be interested in seeing the error. How exactly did we figure out the percentage similarity between organisms and DNA? He said, there are many ways to do it. Some are better than others. The exact number isn't important. The key thing is to lay the number alongside controls. Okay, he quotes a Wikipedia article here. I don't favor Wikipedia because it's not a scholarly source. It really isn't. It's correct on certain things, but it has a lot of evolutionary biases and stuff like that. But he cites Wikipedia. I don't know why he doesn't cite something like Scientific America or something that's a little bit more, with a lot more credibility tied to it. But anyway, it is the relationship between the computed similarity and the controls that allows us to interpret it. Here a little bit, I'm going to give you a definition of what actual controls are, so they kind of understand that. Tompkins' proposal is reasonable. He suggests measuring similarity between chimp reads, short fragments of raw data, and the human assembled genome to eliminate bias introduced by using the human genome to scaffold the chimp genome. This is referring to previous chimp sequences being humanized. That is a good idea. Clever, really. Let's use it. So Tompkins takes the chimp reads and computes the average similarity between these reads and the reference genome. He computes about 85% chimp read human genome. I agree that is what he got, and I get the same number as him. But how much is because of error in the reads? There are no controls, so we do not really know. So he goes on and he says, where he says no control. Now that's not true. We do have some controls in Tompkins' study, and I'll show that in a little bit. But he says 85% equals chimp read, human genome. How do we solve this? We add controls. Let's try a few. We could add some more data to our analysis. Let's say we look at the chimp genome too. Here is a approximation of what we get. 87% chimp read, chimp genome. That isn't right. No chimp is that different from their genome. All right, now I think he's talking about chimp on chimp. Yeah, he's talking about chimp on chimp, like that. So I don't think he's talking about self to self exactly. He may be comparing two different reads, two different sequences. Right, no chimp is that different genome. We expect something closer to 100%. Okay, he is doing well. He's doing chimp on chimp, but he says correct. Something closer to 100%. That's what he says. The problem, however, is that we actually don't know what he did. We don't know. He doesn't give us the specifics of what he did. So we actually don't know if he even replicated Tompkins' method correctly. Simply using shorter reads doesn't replicate Tompkins' method completely. How do I know he's using the same parameters? How do I know that he's including the accessory sequences? How do I know that that he's using best alignment? How do I know he's not doing a global percent alignment of all the search results? I don't know. He's not giving us any details. That's one of the biggest problems I had with his article here, is that he's not giving any details at all of what he did. So I don't know if he actually replicated Tompkins' method or not. He claims he did, but I don't know if he did or not. He goes further. He says, that isn't right. No chimp is that different from their genome. We expect something closer to 100%. We can try another control. How about adding human reads and seeing what we see there. So he does human on human, and human on chimp is 89%, 87%. We see same problem here. All humans are less than 0.5% different. So something clearly is wrong is happening. What is going on? Now, is it possible that he didn't replicate Tompkins' method correctly? Yeah, it's possible. It's possible he could have used a global percent alignment. Maybe he didn't use best alignment. Maybe he didn't include accessory sequences. Maybe he didn't use the exact parameters as Tompkins. Maybe he didn't use, maybe he didn't mask or unmasking, that sort of thing. I don't know. If you use mask, for example, if you mask the repetitive elements, you might get that because it doesn't factor in the stuff within the repetitive elements. But if you actually read Tompkins's paper, it might have been the 101 data set. I know I was reading it this morning or last night. It's either the 101 data sets or it's the 2011 paper, but he says it in there somewhere that most of the differences have been found to be in the repetitive elements, which is why he didn't mask it. It's because he wants to include every sequence in order to make sure he factors in all the information of the genetic information in order to compare. But if Swamidas is masking the repetitive elements, then this would drop his number as a result. So if he's getting 89%, it would actually get a high 90% range if he actually take the liberty of not masking the repetitive elements. Same thing with 87%, it'd probably be somewhere in the 90s as a result, if he didn't mask it. Now, if he masked it, then that would be a different story as well. It also depends on his e-value, which e-values he's using. I assume he would use the same e-value that he used in his 2016 paper, which is what he's looking at. Well, if he did that, that would be 0.1. But if you do a self-to-self on that, it will always be 100%. Always. So I'm thinking he's doing something wrong in his experiment. We see the same problem here. All humans are less than 0.5% difference. So something clearly is wrong is happening. What's going on? He doesn't assume that the wrongness that's happening is with his own experiment. He's not replicating Tompkins' method correctly, possibly. There's no way to know for sure, of course, if he did do Tompkins' method correctly. Why not? Because he doesn't offer us any details. So we have no way of knowing whether he actually replicated correctly. How do I know he did the same parameters? What exactly did he do? The reason why we know that Erika didn't replicate Tompkins' method correctly is because she offered us a lot of details. It's one of the things I like about Erika's. I would say one positive thing about Erika's analysis is that she does offer us a lot of details. That's good because it allows us to evaluate what she did and whether it actually represents the situation properly and that sort of thing. And this is the reason why I was able to sit there and figure out that she was not replicating Tompkins' method correctly, is because she offers this many details. I would like to see these kinds of details offered by Swamidas, but he doesn't do that. Now, granted, he's writing this in a blog, and blogs are usually short articles. That could be the reason why he doesn't offer the details, but he could still offer the details even if you're doing a blog. Richard Bucks did a blog, and he offered all kinds of details of what he did, even though he wasn't writing a peer-reviewed paper. So he could still offer these details, but he doesn't offer them. And so we have no idea whether he's actually replicated Tompkins' method or not. We only have his word on that. Now, in my interview with Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins ended up calling Swamidas a liar, and a lot of evolutionists have gotten mad about that and jumped on that. And I agree that it probably was inappropriate for Tompkins to jump to that. What he should have done was say, well, he might believe that he did, but he probably didn't replicate my methods correctly. He probably thought he did, so he probably ain't lying about it. I mean, he probably thought he replicated it, but he didn't. He probably didn't replicate it correctly. But there's no way for us to know for sure because he doesn't offer any details. That's essential. You have to offer these details, or else we won't be able to know if you even evaluated it correctly. But I'm guessing not, because if you do a self-to-self and you replicate Tompkins' method exactly, no masking, the same e-value, the same, do the same, exact same thing that he did in replicating Tompkins' method, including the accessory sequences, if there is any, choosing the best alignment, just doing all that and doing the method exactly. Self to self will be 100%. And if self to self is 100%, then you also know that doing a chimp against another chimp is also going to be 100%. You know, a different type of chimp. It's still going to be 100%. So this is not correct. This is not correct. So something is amiss in his experiments here. He's not doing it correctly. Regardless whether he tells us the detail, no, I can tell from his numbers that he's not, because he should have gotten 100%. And the reason why we know this is because we have done that evaluation, and the best alignment is always 100% if you do a self to self. All right, using Tompkins' method. All right. Turns out this is identified as a big problem that would be obvious to those who sequence genomes. There is a lot of random error in reads. Okay, that's correct. There's a lot of random errors in reads. If it is raw data after all, the error in the final genome is a lot lower because the errors in individual reads cancels out. The errors in reads, however, is artificial, lower, similar, computed against the genome. I think he's assuming the same thing that Erika's assuming, and that Korf is assuming for certain studies or whatever, however Korf wants to word it. And is assuming that Tompkins is somehow doing a global percent alignment of all the search results. Now, if Tompkins was doing that, okay, they would have a point. Swamidas would have a point. Erika would have a point. Korf would have a point. They would all have a point if that's what Tompkins was doing. However, Tompkins isn't doing that. What is Tompkins doing? Tompkins is taking the highest scoring hit. He's taking the best alignment. So this right here is not what Tompkins is doing. All right. The speller says, is there a way to fix this? Yes, there is. We can subtract out the amount of error in the data by bringing chimp and human reads close to 100% when measuring against their own genomes. Okay, this is talking about a self-to-self analysis, which we've already done. Like last week, we done that. Okay, he says there are two ways to compute the similarity between humans and chimps. The way 98% equals 100% human read to human read, human into chimp read, plus human chimp read. 98% equals 100% chimp read, We can do this over and over again for every individual human or chimp that we have data. we have a lot of data like this, and percent difference comes out by Tompkins method to be about 2% difference or 98% the same. No, it doesn't. It actually comes out to about, if you do it on average, it comes out like 85%. So it doesn't come out to 98%. But if you do it on, if you did, like, I think what he's talking about is doing 98% onto 100%, like that, human read and a human genome and that sort of thing. That if you sit there and factor in if you factor in masking and you factor in all the same elements that Tompkins did, and you do it against itself, it will come up to 100% every single time. Not 98%, not 50%, not 60%. It'll come to 100% every single time. Of course, I think they're assuming that Tompkins is taking all of the matches and doing a global percent. I think that's what they're assuming that Tompkins is doing. He's not doing that, but that's what they're assuming he's doing. But what does 2% or 98% mean anyway? All right, I'm not going to keep going through this because it's getting off. It's like, okay, of course, if you do not like the correction to Tompkins figures, you could always look at mice reads to rat genome numbers. The uncorrected number is about 70% equals mouse read, mouse 85% chimp reads, human chimp, which clearly is below 85%, leaving us with the same interpretation. So again, this is implying the same strawman argument, assuming that the amount of similarity or dissimilarity somehow affects whether they're the same kind or not the same kind, which the amount of similarity dissimilarity doesn't impact that at all. We're going to be talking about that next time around because I think that's important to discuss, because that's a big issue in this, because I think Erika misrepresents what we believe on kinds multiple times. I don't think she understands it. And look at what Swami Das says here. Humans and chimps are more similar than mice and rats. This is a common argument that many, I think Korf used it on me as well. But this is a common argument among many evolutionists. And the reality is that what they're trying to say is that since they're more similar than chimps and rats are, and you agree that chimps and rats are the same kind, therefore humans and chimps must be related in the same kind. No, that doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that at all. You can have two different organisms that are not the same kind be more similar, in other words, have more in common than, if that's the way God created them, than two different organisms that are the same kind. Because the issue is not what makes them a kind, the same kind of creature, is what they have in common in terms of the way in which they're similar. How are they similar? Not how much, but how are they similar to each other, which could be fundamental in distinguishing them as the same kind of creature. Humans and chimps, it's not about how much we are similar or different from each other. It's how we are similar or different. It's the kinds of similarities or differences. And the kind of differences that we have are fundamental in distinguishing us from other primates, like chimps or apes or gorillas or whatever the case may be. And the kinds of differences we have are fundamental in distinguishing us from them. And that's why we're not the same kind with them at all. We're not primates at all. And so that's the part that a lot of these people in this discussion don't seem to understand. They propagate this straw man over and over and over again, but it is a straw man. All right, so this is explained by the mathematical formulas of evolution. I don't know what mathematical formulas he's talking about, but it's strange in YZ at the very best, because he's misrepresenting YZ positions. At the very least, it tells us that God is nearly as concerned about disapproving evolution as we are. He's not concerned about disapproving evolution. He's all for disapproving evolution. Evolution is a lie from the devil, so he's all for that. Yeah, that's Swami Das's article, his blog. He didn't offer that many details in it, and so we don't have no idea what he did. We only have his word that he did it, which is probably why Tompkins questioned it. I think it's premature of Tompkins to call him a liar. I wouldn't pounce on that too much. I know a lot of evolutionists do. But in any given case, the main concern would probably be Swaminus right? Well, it's based on the same straw man argument, assuming it has something to do with the difference or the amount of differences rather than the kinds of differences. And so he doesn't understand what we believe on created kinds either. In Erika's case, I've corrected Erika on this many times. And so I don't think it's just simply because she doesn't know what our position are. I think it's because she doesn't want to. She wants to continue to argue the way she argues, so she doesn't want to understand it. So it's not because she lacks the mental capacity to understand it. I think she's a very smart girl. I think that she understands what I'm saying, but I think that she doesn't want to. I think she doesn't want to understand it, and because she wants to continue to argue the way she argues, and I think that's where the biggest issue is. I guess the easiest way is thinking, if you want to think of it, this is kind of a deceptive thing. It's more self-deceptive. It's more where she has convinced herself of her own argument on this, and she ain't gonna relent from it, despite the fact that she's misrepresenting our position on it. But in any given case. Let's go to what Erika has to say on controls here, and then we'll hop back into it. And I'm going to define what a control is afterwards.
Perhaps we should introduce some controls, some references, and run this comparison with another pair of species just like we did last time, because it went so well then. Whilst I was gearing up to make this comparison, I found that someone else already had. Joshua Swamidass. Joshua Swamidass is a religious scientist who accepts evolution and the age of the earth, and published a write-up on his forum, Peaceful Science, titled Mind the Controls, about this very topic. And he's been on this channel before. He's a friend of the channel. He notes that using Tompkins' methods in his 2016 piece does in fact yield an 85% similarity between humans and chimps, and that he got the same results when using this, at the time, newly published raw data.
Of course, Dr. Dr. Swamidass did not take into account, or he didn't add any details telling us exactly what he did. So we don't know if he actually replicated his method. All we have is his word on that. And that's a problem, because we need those details in order to make that assessment. So without those details, it becomes kind of like, yeah, maybe it's questionable, because we saw some of those results and like, wait a minute, that doesn't make no sense, because if Tompkins is using the best alignment, and if he's actually replicating Tompkins' method correctly, then if he's doing it, he should get 100%. If he's doing it self-to-self, if he's doing a comparison between, like, say, one human versus another human, he should get a percentage that's somewhere within 4 to 5% difference, right? Even Swamidass admitted that in his paper, within a 5% difference. I think Tompkins mentioned within a 4% difference in our discussion in the interview. And so he should get that. And since he didn't, he just concluded, oh, well, that must mean Tompkins' method is flawed. Well, no. Because we actually know that the best alignment on self-to-self could be 100%. If that's true, then it should give you a correct percentage. Unless Swamidass is not doing it correctly. And I don't think Swamidass is doing it correctly.
Swamidass thought to test the veracity of these results by introducing controls. You'll notice earlier that in the myriad of different comparisons that I ran myself, I didn't include rats and mice, and that's because I was saving it for this portion of the video, since Dr. Swamidass has already done the work.
Now try to understand something. Erika did not do mice at all. Okay? She did not do mice and rats, not this time around. Now she might do it in her next series of experiments when she brings out our next video. I assume it's going to be soon. I think it's going to be soon, but I don't know exactly when. She told me that she might try to get it out before Christmas, but here they're already almost Christmas and she has not gotten that out. Christmas is like tomorrow, so I doubt she have it out before Christmas. But she did say that she might have it out before Christmas, but apparently that didn't happen that way. But in any given case, she might have it out by the time this video comes out. I don't know. Um, um, I plan on putting this video out probably at least by this coming Friday. I'm going to do some editing of it. But obviously, um, she did not do rats and mice. Korf mentioned about her doing rats and mice. Just to kind of clarify to Dr. Ian Korf and others, she did not actually do the results of rats and mice. The reason is because she says the Swamidas beat her to it. And so she's relying on the blog from Swamidas. Okay, she's relying on that blog from Swamidas, and that's what she's relying on. Except that Swamidas's blog is inconsistent with what Tompkins actually did do, which makes me question whether he did it exactly. There's no way to know for sure because Swamidas offered us no details. Not like Erika. Erika offered us lots of details. This is one of the reasons why we're able to evaluate it. I love the fact that she offered these details. This is the reason why I know that she didn't replicate Tompkins' method. It's hard to say that for sure, 100% about Swamidas's because the fact that he didn't offer those details. However, my suspicion is that he didn't because I know the results would be on self-to-self on the best alignment. It'd be 100%, which he did not get. So that makes me question whether he did it exactly. There's so many details that's left out whether he replicated Tompkins' method correctly or not. Did he use the right parameters? Did he include accessory sequences in that? Did he use the best alignment? Did he use masking or was it unmasking? Or what the case is? Or Tompkins didn't use masking. Did he not use masking? Or did he use masking? You know, because the default parameter in BLAST is masking. Do you use the default parameters? Do you use the right E value? And that sort of thing in order to replicate his method. So I think that at the end of the day, I don't think that Swamidas replicated his method because he's getting results that are inconsistent with what we would expect to get if you have replicated Tompkins' method. If you replicate Tompkins' method correctly, you should get 100% on self-to-self, as we've seen, because the best alignment and so forth. Best alignment against the self is always going to be 100%, and because it's the highest scoring hit, and so that's what you would expect. He's not getting that, so something is amiss there. So I don't think he's actually replicating his method correctly, and we don't have any of the details to evaluate that for sure, and so that's a problem to begin with. So let's move forward.
Swamidas downloaded the same contiguous sequences that Tompkins utilized and compared the chimpanzee to the chimpanzee and got an 87% similarity.
That assumes that he did Tompkins' method correctly, of course, which more than likely he didn't because of some of the results that he got that we know is not consistent with what Tompkins did.
Then he compared humans and got an 89% similarity. Then humans and chimps, as opposed to the other way around, and got 87% similarity.
And of course, we went over all this, but the problem is that the details is missing from it on what he actually did do. So I don't know whether he actually replicated Tompkins' method or not. But some of the things that he said, such as on a self-to-self test and on comparing humans and or different kind of human or one type of chimp against another type of chimp, whatever the case may be, he's not getting results we would expect if he replicated Tompkins' method correctly. And so my guess is that he didn't replicate Tompkins' method correctly. Again, there's no way they'll be 100% sure because he didn't include details in that.
Swamidas then decided to compare rats and mice. Mice and rats are typically thought to be around 82% similar by conventional means compared to the 98.8% in humans and chimps. So Swamidas simply ran the comparison using Tompkins' methods and found that it yields a 70% similarity between rats and mice.
Again, that also depends on whether he actually replicated the experiment correctly, and I doubt he did. For example, Did he use masking? Tompkins didn't use any masking. Did he use masking? Because if you mask the repetitive elements, and that could actually drop the number or raise the number depending on how much similarity or differences involved in the sequences. And it would depend on a lot of things that he did. It all depends on whether he replicated it correctly. And I don't think he did, based upon what he says in the blog.
At least in this case, since Tompkins was utilizing the gapped parameter, the differences do scale. They're not exactly pure nonsense like with the ungapped parameter. For instance, chimpanzees compared with chimpanzees are more similar than humans versus chimps, which are more similar than rats versus mice, even though the actual number itself is considerably off when compared with conventional means.
Actually, his 101 dataset paper, which is 2016 paper, that's the one that Swamidas is actually evaluating. He used ungapped parameter. So again, she's a little confused here. That's not correct. Swamidas's paper does not, as far as controls go, well, as far as the Tompkins study goes, I don't think he replicated it correctly. He said he replicated it for fun. That's the reason why Tompkins said they thought that the time span that he replicated in a couple hours, because it sounded like, because the casual nature of what Swamidas said, it seemed to make you think that the casual nature of it, that he doing it in a very short span of time. And of course it takes a lot longer to do these kinds of studies, but that's what Tompkins is pouncing on. I agree with Erika. You don't necessarily have to do a full-scale study. You could do it on a smaller level, but you still would have to replicate the methods correctly. And it still takes a lot of time, even if you do it on a small scale. But in any given case, you still have to replicate the full method. Not the full study necessarily, but the full method. The whole method has to be replicated, because that's how Tompkins got the results that he got. I will deal with his methods. I'll deal with Tompkins' method and Erika's methods and things like that, and everybody's methods on the last part of this series. So I don't want to cover that at this time. But I do want to talk about what Korf said. But before I do that, let me define what a control is, experimental control, just so that everybody can know. Scientists typically end up using experimental controls to eliminate the other possibilities, or to make it at least less likely the other possibilities could impact a particular result. Because you come up with an experiment and you get this result. You get result X. But how do you know that result X is not being affected by results Y and Z? I mean, how do you know that? How do you know that the results are the result of what you did in the experiment, or the result of these other possibilities, Y or Z? Maybe it's the type of parameter you set. Maybe there's an issue with the algorithm. How do you know everything's working right and doing right and getting the right result and that sort of thing? And so what controls are these side experiments that you do within your study to help to eliminate other, or at least reduce the chances of the possibility that other possibilities could be impacting your result. Like, for example, if there's a problem with the algorithm you're using, if there's an issue with the tools that you're using, or if there's something involved with the way you're doing it, or maybe some sort of anomaly that's happening. Maybe it's a fluke. Maybe it's not. Maybe if you do it a second time, it's not going to happen again. Whatever the case may be, but you use these controls to help regulate it. Now, controls are not the rule in science. You don't have to use. I mean, you should use controls, but it's not like if you don't use controls, you're going to get kicked out of the science club or something, or something like that. And not all scientists use controls. You should use controls. A lot of times they use controls, but they may not always use controls. And now, I don't know if it's in this clip or not that I have of Korf, but I remember Korf sitting there saying, because I remember telling Korf that 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 not all evolutionists use a self-to-self analysis or anything like that. A lot of these evolutionists, and so it's kind of a bit special pleading to have to argue that Tompkins has to do this, or or you can't trust his results. And other evolutionists, not all evolutionists do it. They just do it. Evolutionists are doing a chimp and human comparison. They don't usually sit there and do a self-to-self. They might do a self-to-self, but they don't always do a self-to-self. And he said, oh, well, they might be doing it in the background. Well, that's also special pleading, because then one of Tompkins is doing things in the background. Now, chances are most time, I think that if they're doing it, they're likely doing it. They're likely going to report it in the paper. It just makes sense that they would. If you're going to go through all the process of everything you did and you're going to put that in a peer-reviewed paper, you're likely going to tell you if you did controls or not done controls, so forth. As we're going to see in a little bit, Tompkins actually did do controls. But you can't argue that it's okay if other evolutionists do it in the background and then argue that Tompkins didn't. That would be inconsistent. But Korf at one point had argued that. And so I don't remember if I got that in the clip. I know it's recorded somewhere. If I look for it, I can find where it is. But I got a particular clip right here that I'm going to be showing of Korf in my conversation over Tompkins' use of controls. And before I actually go into Tompkins' papers to show you whether Tompkins used controls or not, we're going to look at what Dr. Ian Korf has to say on the matter.
Yeah, that's a vision that is maybe what they did originally, way before, and then for some reason Tompkins redid their study but did a bad job of it. Okay, the part that Erika did, where she said, if you even compare a human to a human, you would get numbers that are not 100%. She's correct on that. His method doesn't work even if you compare it a human versus a human. You wouldn't get 100%.
That's another story.
No, it's not.
I'm still confused about how you can get up. I don't understand what you mess up with Tompkins' method. It's just go.
No, I know, but he's done his method. If you use his method and compare a human to a human, you would not get 100%. You would get 80-something%.
That's what she said.
She's right.
Have
she's right about that.
Have you done that before?
Yeah, she's right about that. She's 100% right about it. You can see it from his tables in his CSV and his GitHub. You can see that that's the...
All right, this is incorrect. If you take the CSV files, I think he's assuming that because some of the percentages are like low, like 70% or 80% or something like that. But that doesn't prove that. He's just assuming his evolutionary views as a result. This is one of the issues that I had with the Korf. The further we moved into the discussion, the more his evolutionary bias was interfering his judgment. But in no way does that you can't prove that from that. You have to be able to do the controls and stuff like that to be able to do that. And when you do a self-to-self using Tompkins' method, you get 100% because it's best alignment. Anytime you do a 1-to-1 match and it's a 1-to-1 alignment, you got like got this sequence and you're doing a 1-to-1 comparison, right? Because that's what best alignment does. Is 1-to-1 comparison with that particular sequence, the highest scoring sequence, or it's going to be 100% every time, every single time. It's only if you sit there and factor in other search results of other different spurious alignments would you get less than 100%, which Tompkins isn't doing. So if you do his method correctly, and that includes using best alignment, you come up with 100%. So this is completely false. You can't be able to tell that from looking at CSV files. More than likely, what Korf is referring to is because some of his results are less than what he thinks that they should be because he's an evolutionist. Like they're below 60% or below 70% or something like that. But if you look at his 2018 paper, which is really the only one that he really provides, he might provide sources from the others, but I think that his 2018 paper is the one he provides the CSV files, and it's all publicly accessible. You don't have to email them to get the information. You get the raw data and things like that, and you can put it into a form of a table, and I've done that, and I've showed that on screen and so forth. And so if you do that, then the lowest percentage is 64% that he has on his contigs. If he was including these spurious alignments, you would expect percentages less than that. You would expect eventually getting into percentages that are 30% long or something of that nature. He's not including these spurious alignments. He's including best alignment each time he does it. Korf is just simply assuming his evolutionary views.
When we do experiments, like scientists, when scientists do experiments, they also do controls of their experiments. Like that's like a control is like a really important part of an experiment. So, for example, if you're going to compare human and chimp, what's the control for that? How do you know that your software works? You have to do other things like compare a chimp to a chimp and a human to human.
He did compare a chimp. He did compare a chimp to a chimp.
The whole human genome wasn't available. The whole chimp genome wasn't available. You couldn't really do that. So you have to.
It's not available today.
Pay close attention to this because Dr. Korf gets really inconsistent. You heard what he said about, he said, like you do a control like chimp on chimp. And then I said, well, Dr. Tompkins did do chimp on chimp as a control. And he said, oh, well, you can't do chimp on chimp because the whole chimp genome wasn't available at the time. Did you see what he just said, right? He literally contradicted himself within 2 seconds. Wow. Right with the 2 seconds. So this is why I'm glad I recorded this. Saying, you can't say I'm misrepresenting. That's what he said. Said, oh, well, why don't you do like chimp? You have to do things like chimp on chimp. And said, well, he did do chimp on chimp. Oh, well, the full chimp genome wasn't available at the time, so it doesn't count. It's like this is terrible special pleading. It really is. And on top of that, Erika, this is one of the controls that Erika did actually on chimp. Different chimp species against other chimp species, as well as self to self. And she did these kinds of experiments as well. And Tompkins, according to Korf, you can't do that because the full chimp genome is not available. Now, try to understand something. Korf also said that you don't need to have the full chimp genome available to do a genetic comparison between chimp and chimp, or chimp and human. Well, if you don't need a full genetic comparison, a full genome, then why would it matter if you need that to do that as a control? You should be able to at least do that as a control if you're doing that. And he says, well, you want to make sure the algorithm is working properly. I agree with that. You could do that to make sure the algorithm is working properly. Now, that's not why Erika does it, though. Erika does it. Her goal is to show that she thinks that Tompkins' results are inaccurate, and his method doesn't work as a result. Not that the algorithm is working properly, because that would be a test on her algorithm rather than on Tompkins' algorithm. And so Tompkins would have to do the controls in order to be able to show that his algorithm is working appropriately. But with Erika, she is challenging his method because she's challenging his results. That's the difference. That's not exactly the same thing as what Korf is claiming here. Because what Korf is claiming here is doing controls so you can make sure your algorithm is working appropriately. Now, that makes sense. That's a good way of doing controls. That's a good reason for doing the controls. But that's not the reason that Erika's doing it. Erika's doing it for an entirely different reason than that.
You have to know control.
Human genome is now recently sequenced.
Right.
But the chimp genome isn't fully sequenced yet. This is one of the things that I noted as well, that really do have true similarity between chimps and humans until we have a full telomere sequence of the chimp genome.
Yeah.
We have a human genome fully sequenced now. Finally.
Stop. So a second.
Yeah.
When you're developing the methodology for the comparison, it doesn't matter what genome you're working with. You wouldn't just use human and chimp. You would use 10, 20 different genomes, including synthetic genomes that you made up yourself, just to make sure that your methods work. He didn't do that part. He didn't do like all of the background that would support his experiment. That's the problem. Like, where's this comparison of lots of, like, a worm to a worm, a fly to a fly? These are tiny genomes and they take very little time to do. Like, why didn't he do lots of other comparisons to show that his method is generally applicable, and now I will apply it to human chimp, and this is what I show? He didn't do that. He didn't do his homework properly. This is what I'm saying. He's not good at bioinformatics. He's not doing his job properly. He's guessing.
I mean, the kind of controls that Erika used was not good either.
No, actually, some of her controls were very good. She did things like let's compare a rat to a mouse. Let's compare a lion to a tiger. Those are appropriate controls to do. Say, does the software work?
Yeah, but what would it prove though? If he
it doesn't prove anything. It just says what's the behavior of the program. He doesn't know what the behavior of his method is when he compares any other sequences.
No,
he only did one thing, and then he said, then that was it. Human versus chimp. Like, where's all the other comparisons that you could have done?
He admits that there are issues involved when using BLAST. I think he was
not
just
about
trying to
using
show
BLAST.
issues.
It's not the issues of using BLAST. It's his whole experimental design that's the problem. He did not develop a study that said, I have a methodology. Now let's show that the method works and then apply it to specific situations. He just cherry picked one thing, didn't talk about, like, it's hard for me to describe how badly he did his study. Like, I think you look at this and think, he's just like nitpicking or whatever. It's like, no, like, this is why it's like, what he's done is this, like, it's so wrong. It's like, how can he call himself a scientist when he's done it so badly? It's so bad. It's like,
well, I think he did use controls and stuff like that. It just
no, I'm telling you, look, like, I am an actual scientist, my profession. Like, why are you arguing me, telling me I don't know my job? I do know my job. I'm not telling you.
No, I wasn't telling you that.
I know, but you're saying, you're saying, oh, I think he did do his controls. I'm telling you that.
No, I'm telling you that it's in his papers. Like,
no, I read his papers.
Chimp.
I read his papers. You can't.
Dr. Korf says that he read his papers, but he keeps making lots and lots of mistakes. And it seems to me like he's getting a lot of his information third hand. So I question whether he actually read his papers or did he skim through it, did he read some of it. It's because, I mean, someone like me who's been involved in this controversy for a while has read his papers like, several times and keep rereading it and having to remind myself of certain things that he said and going through it and finding certain things out and that sort of thing and just rereading it over and over and over again. And then he comes into this controversy and he's doing a little light reading. Did he read all of his papers? Did he only read some of his papers? Did he only read what he wanted to read? Did he skim through it? Did he read it once? I mean, exactly what does he mean when he says he read his papers? Tompkins wrote 5 papers that Erika presented in her video, and these are probably going to be the most relevant to the discussion. And did he read all 5 papers? I don't know. It seems questionable. It seems very, very questionable since Dr. Korf seems to make a lot of mistakes with Tompkins' study. He made some general mistakes on his study, and he said, "Oh, I was talking about certain papers," but then those same other papers that he thinks that he was talking about. Dr. Tompkins also used best alignment on those two. So, and he didn't know why he was using controls and using chimp on chimp. You can see this in this 2015 paper. He's got several controls in this. 2015 paper is the one where he's basically retracting what he had said in his 2013 paper. He's redoing the experiment, but this time he's trying to take certain precautions to make sure there's no issue with their algorithm. And so he uses certain controls, like, for example, he uses other algorithms. He uses the older, several versions of the older versions of BLAST pre-bug. He compared that with the results of Nukemer and LASZ. Both of them are algorithms that I think I don't know that much about Nukemer. I do know at least a little bit about LASZ. It's supposed to be a written version of BLASZ, and LASZ is an alignment basically. And so he's using the results from these two algorithms to help support, make sure that there's no bug in the algorithm and things like that. And in addition to that, in this 2015 paper, he also does a self-to-self with chimp. And in 2018 paper, he also says he does this now, or at least with the chimp sequences. And so we're going to go into that. He actually does a control with that. So this is going to be interesting. We'll get into that here in a little bit. But he does do controls, and apparently he didn't know that. I think a lot of his information or claims, the parameters, things like that, he thought that Tompkins did e-value of 10. That's true in 2 out of the 5 papers I know where he had e-value of 10. One of them, though, is this 2011 paper where he tried 5 different e-values for each experiment, because he did 2 experiments, one masked, one unmasked, in which case he did 5 different e-values, and one of them was 10. But he was trying different e-values to see what the results would be, depending on what e-value he used and so forth. And that was one of his earlier studies. I think that was his earliest, actually. The earliest they were evaluating, at least. And he practiced controls and things like that. And he did e-value of 10, and he did a e-value of 10 in another paper, I think. But usually he does like 0.1 or something like that. So yeah, it seemed like his knowledge of what Tompkins did and didn't do mostly came from Erika, rather than him actually looking at his raw data. Like he might have skimmed through it, maybe read some parts of his study, that sort of thing, but not really that familiar with what Tompkins did and didn't do. So I question whether he actually has a good, robust knowledge of what Tompkins did and didn't do. This is not me challenging or telling him how to do his job or anything like that. He's not a geneticist, so I'm not telling him how to do his job, and he's not the one writing the papers. Tompkins is. Tompkins would know better than anybody what he did and didn't do in his papers, because I wasn't there when Tompkins did the experiments. Neither was Dr. Korf, neither was Erika. So Tompkins is going to be the best bet as far as knowing what he did and didn't do, whether he has it in writing or not in writing, and try to understand what he actually accomplished. This is why I talk to Tompkins and ask him questions about what he did and didn't do and that sort of thing, so I can better understand, to make sure of what he actually did do. And he did take the best alignment and that sort of thing. And so Korf seems to have a lot of misunderstandings of a lot of his papers, and I think he's getting a lot of his information third hand, to be honest. And more so than just from him getting from the papers. I think he just doesn't agree with it because he has certain evolutionary assumptions about chimps and humans, and that's interfering in his judgment quite extensively. It's not a question of telling him how to do his job. It's because, like I said, he's not a geneticist. He's someone who specializes in bioinformatics. That's fine. He could specialize in that, but he has no actual academic degree or field. At least not as a geneticist. As a biologist and someone who probably deals with genetics, I imagine, because I think biologists do deal with genetics, and that's fine. But he's not a geneticist per se, and he's not the one writing the papers. The one who's writing the papers is Tompkins. So it's not his job anyhow. His job as a scientist is not being put into question. It's what Tompkins did and didn't do that's being questioned. And Tompkins is actually employing controls. He actually talks about it in his papers, and we're gonna go over that in here a little bit, so you'll see for yourself. But I don't think Dr. Korf understands Tompkins' work at all. That's why it's kind of hard to trust it. Plus, he's approaching this from evolutionary assumptions on top of that. Like, for example, like when he said he looked at the table and could tell that he's doing it this way. What makes him think that he's doing it that way? Well, because of the percentages that he found, because he thinks that they will definitely find it to be 98% or 96% or something of that nature. And that's just his evolutionary bias coming through. And that shows that he is approaching this more with his evolutionary assumptions intact.
Do chip on chip at the time he did it. It wasn't a full genome. You couldn't have done it anyway. It's not proper control.
You wouldn't be able to do it today, then.
Whereas I can do synthetic genomes and show you that. I can make up genomes and show you the property of 80% self-to-self. It's just like a property of sequence alignment. It has nothing to do with humans and chimps.
Didn't you previously say that chip on chip would be a control like you do?
Yeah, you could do that if you had the whole thing. Like the way he did his controls were ill-conceived. Like if he did controls, there's no way he would have done the correct controls. Like just because of the way he's done his experiment, like how did like the fact that he's like comparing completely different parts of the genome to arrive at this like 80% thing.
We didn't have the complete sequence of the mouse genome either in 2018.
And here's the thing: you don't need the complete sequences of anything to do it. You just need a bunch of contiguous sequence. So that's the difference. It's how much sequence you need. Like, why are people like Erika or Tompkins or anybody doing the entire human genome comparison? You only need to compare small parts of it if you choose correctly. Wait on it. Sort of like if you want to know, like the approval rate of the current president, you have to poll every single person in the country. It's like, oh, sorry, we didn't get every single person. Like, we need to get 300 million people polled. We only did 150 million. We got to go back and get the whole thing. No, you can get a really reliable estimate from polling 1,500 people. You don't have to poll 300 million. Like, it's things that's like sampling. Statistical sampling can be robust if the sample is large enough. You don't need the whole genome. It's just things like that. Like people don't understand even things like statistical sampling.
All right. We're going to do some blast results here in a minute. Again, if you do Tompkins' results, you get 100% on self-to-self because you're using best alignment. She didn't use best alignment when she did her self-to-self. And what Korf is talking about here is not best alignment. What Korf is talking about here is if you're considering all these other matches. But that's not what Tompkins is doing. Tompkins is not considering all these other matches. He's considering only best alignment. If you compare best alignment with itself, the highest scoring hit, and you compare it with itself, would you get 100%? Yes. Every time. No matter what the e-value is, no matter what, whether you're using masking or unmasking, no matter what the parameters are, you'll always get 100% on self-to-self. Always. That's why Carter kept getting 100%, because you will always get 100% on it. On a one-to-one match like that, you will always get 100%. Okay? So you're not comparing apples and oranges, you're comparing apples and apples. But if you were to compare other parts of the matches, the different matches, then you're comparing different parts of the genome, and they're unrelated to each other, but they do create alignments too. And you compare that self-to-self, it's going to be less than 100%, especially if you do kind of like a total global alignment thing of all the matches. It's going to be less than 100% on self-to-self. But that's not what Tompkins is doing. And so if you replicate Tompkins' method correctly, he says if you replicate Tompkins' method, he said, I can replicate Tompkins' method and get less than 100%. That's false. That's 100% false. If he replicates Tompkins' method correctly, he would get 100%. Every single time, regardless what parameters he's using, regardless whether he uses an e-value, a different e-value or not. On a self-to-self test, it would get 100%. You could develop random sequences, compare it against itself using Tompkins' method and get 100%. The only way you would not get 100%, the only way is if you're including all of these other spurious alignments. Because I agree with both Korf and Erika that Tompkins has spurious alignments in his search results. I agree with that. I don't agree for the same reasons that Erika, and I might even take it a little bit closer to what Korf thinks on that as far as the spurious alignment and the reasons why that is. But that's not what Tompkins is doing. Tompkins is taking the best alignment. So that's kind of piggybacking off of what we said last week, but he's taking the best alignment. And so they would have a point if that's not what he was doing, if he wasn't taking best alignment. But he is taking best alignment, and that's the whole issue there. All right. I wanted to go and do some blast results on that. He mentioned coming up with some random sequences. I want to try that as well to show you what you come up with if you use Tompkins' method. All right, let's jump on into that. Okay, we're going to do the same. We're also going to try a worm here. Let's do. Okay, let's do. I'm going to take this sequence out. That way we have no files chosen, and we'll come up with some random sequences. Okay, this is not actually reflect the actual genome. We're just going to come up with some random sequences. A, T, G, C, like C, C, A, G, T. I feel like I'm singing a song here. C, T, 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 G, C, T. Let's throw in some repetitive stuff. A. Then go G, T. Then go G, C, 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 T, T. Then we're gonna do A, G, A, G, A, G. A, G, A, G, and then we're going to do a bunch of T's, then we're going to do A, C, G, T, okay, a bunch of G's, a bunch of A's, a bunch of T's, bunch of C's, and then we'll go A, G, T, C, G. Okay, we'll do it that way, and then we're gonna copy. We're gonna copy it like that. Then we'll paste it here. All right, so it's the exact same sequence. It's made up completely. We're just making up sequence at random here. Okay, it shows out in the window. We're going to do blast in. Okay, we'll do 100. Okay, what about the default? Okay, Tompkins, you usually use 0.1, so we're going to use that. Where it says 11, you always use where it says 11. Max matches query range. We'll leave these at default. I don't know exactly what Tompkins' parameters were on these. The only thing I can't duplicate with the online version, because I have trouble trying to download Blast onto my computer. So the only thing I can really do right now with it is the online version. And the online version, I think you cannot. I think it uses the default parameter of gapped. That's the only thing, is it's going to use gapped regardless. So we'll just have to go with that. But other than that, everything else is exactly the same. You see no masking here, same as Tompkins's. Okay, now let's see what we would get. Okay. Now, as you see, description box, none has been found, but it doesn't matter because we're just doing one sequence against itself. Now, look at what happens against itself, 100%. Random sequences against itself is 100%. Okay, that's what we did. All right, but it did create a lot of spurious alignments. Got this one right here at 90%. You see all these repetitive stuff, right? That I created. All these repetitive stuff, 76%. Wow. Okay, look at all these different alignments. These are all spurious alignments. Okay, 74%. Look how short these are too. Look how small they are compared to the major sequence here. They're pretty short. A lot of them are repetitive stuff as well. Notice. All right. Now we're going to do it mask, just to kind of get a contrast here, what we're looking at. Here, since I masked it, remember a lot of the stuff that I put in there were repetitive. Now all the repetitive stuff is masked out, right? And look at this, 100%, 100%. So yes, Erika, the issue is masking, okay? Now there's no way to test the gap and ungap with this. Carter has done some significant testing with that I'd probably rely on him on that. But 100%, 100%. That's why you get 100% if you mask out the repetitive elements, because you don't have those spurious alignments, and you get alignment match here, 100%, and over here you get 100% as a result. That's why you get that. Now, if you don't mask the repetitive elements, you would get that if you're doing a global percent alignment, which is what I think she was doing. However, Tompkins was doing the self-to-self 100%. So mask or unmask, it would always yield 100% as a result. It's pretty cool that we did that. Now, there is something else I want to test. He mentioned worm, because worms got really small genomes. So let's see if we can do something with worms. Okay, I'm here in Ensemble. We'll type in worms. Get my glasses on. Type in worms. Let's look up worms. Alright. We'll take the first one that comes up. That's a worm genome. Okay. Let's see. Let's do this one. Okay, let's go to export data. Next. Let's go to text. And we're going to save as here. We'll call it worm gene. Worm gene. And worm genome. We'll call it worm genome. All right, and we're going to save it to downloads, make it easier. All right, so they're saved. Okay, let's go here. All right. We're back here. All right, we're going to do the worm genome. All right, we're going to take away all that. All right, let's go here. All right, we're going to do a worm genome to itself, or a particular sequence of it. All right, we're going to do it to itself. Okay, you got blast in again, 100. We're going to use that as our E value again. Word size 11. Okay, we're going to leave all the defaults here, and we're going to take away masking. All right, now let's see what our results are. Okay, there it is right there. That's the one, right? All right. Oh, 100%. 100% identity. One-to-one match. Always 100% on best alignment. Highest score right here among all this. Okay, and then go to next match. Let's see what the next match is. Oh, 91%. It's not 100%, is it? Nope, because it's unmasked, so it's got the repetitive stuff in it. Now, if you include the best alignment, it will be 100%. If you include all this other stuff, it would not be. Okay, so that's a worm alignment. But if you do that best alignment, do Tompkins method, 100%. It's only when you don't do Tompkins' method, like if you do global percent alignment, if you include the stuff, look how short this sequence is compared to this. This right here is pretty long, right? If you look over here, it's pretty short. These are short sequences. Look how short that is. Okay. And depending on, and these are comparing unrelated things. These are comparing unrelated things, which is what Korf was talking about. He's comparing unrelated things. So if you include this stuff, then yeah, I think Korf would have a point. I think Erika would have a point. I think Ruheb would have a point if that's the case. However, that's not the case. That's not what Tompkins is doing. What Tompkins is doing is he is taking the best alignment, the highest scoring hit. This is the highest scoring hit right here. And he's taking the highest scoring hit. And the highest scoring hit against itself is always 100%. And since we know that's behaving like it should behave, then we know if you compare it against another someone else, another genome or another sequence of another organism, it's going to give you the best alignment, and that best alignment is going to be the best one-to-one match that you should have between the two organisms. So the algorithm is working perfectly. Tompkins method is working okay. It's just the fact that people are not duplicating it correctly. That's the issue. So yeah, now, what about this question that Tompkins is not doing controls? That's a common one that's often made. Is that the case? Is Tompkins not doing controls? Now, you notice something in the clip you just saw with Dr. Ian Korf. He was constantly bouncing back and forth. Dr. Korf is extremely inconsistent with what he says. He doesn't stay true to something that he says. Like he said, at one point he brought up that you could use chimp on chimp, and then he contradicted that when he found out I brought up the fact that Tompkins did do that. Did actually compare chimp with chimp. He actually compared, I actually looked it up, and it's actually a self-to-self analysis. That's the surprising thing, because a lot of people in this country said, oh, no, Tompkins didn't do nothing like that. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. I found it. And I will show it to you. I think it's in his 2015 paper. But he actually did do it. He actually did do a self-to-self. And we'll see that. And we'll also see him doing it. Similar thing in his 2018 paper as well. And so he does actually use some controls. I don't think he used controls in every case. But if the argument is he didn't use any controls, which is what Tompkins or what Korf and Erika both was arguing, then the fact that you can demonstrate that he did use controls shows that statement is false. Now, he would later if you notice, he contradicted himself. When he brought up the controls, he didn't say, oh, well, you can't do whole chimp genome because we don't have the whole chimp genome sequence. That doesn't matter in terms of using controls. You can still use it as a control regardless. Because if, say, for example, you use a self-to-self, chimp to chimp, then as Tompkins did, then you wouldn't require the whole genome. And strangely enough, he will end up contradicting himself later afterwards, saying, oh, well, we don't need the whole genome of the chimp sequence in order to do a genetic comparison. But then he says, oh, well, you can't use it as a control because we don't have the whole chimp genome sequence. So you can see him bouncing back and forth directly in the conversation. He changed his position within 5 minutes. And the funny thing is that Erika does actually do this. She compares different kinds of chimps with each other and compares self-to-self analysis with it. She does both. But you can't sit there and say that Erika's position of taking that is appropriate control and then argue, no, Tompkins can't use that. You can't argue that. Now, I'm not saying that is what Korf is arguing. Or Korf might think that Erika didn't use that as an appropriate control. But he does think that some of Erika's controls were appropriate. Now, the issue of comparing different organisms, that one is what I was referring to. Because since YSCs are concerned with the kind of differences, to me, it doesn't matter. Let me back up. Say, for example, you found out that mice, let's say you do the evaluation, you replicate Tompkins method correctly and everything, and it comes to 85% similar. Okay, how would you know if that's not the true similarity between chimps and rats? You don't. You can't argue that our position somehow warrants that it wouldn't be, because they're the same kind of creature, because that's a straw man argument. Because it's the kind of differences and similarities that they have that makes them either the same kind of organism or different. Okay, so it's not the fact that how much they are similar or how much they are different from each other. So we're okay with whether it's 85% or 95% or whatever the case may be, turn out to be. But how would you know that that's not that the previous studies done of that's correct? Well, you don't know. You have to assume that the other studies are correct and that study's wrong. But what if that study's correct and the other studies are wrong? So this is the reason why I said that this may not be the appropriate control for that. Now, the way Tompkins does is he does it perfectly, because he uses chimp sequences, and he also uses self-to-self analysis. And Korf says you can use that to prove the algorithm is working correctly. And I agree with him on that you can use it to show that the algorithm is working correctly. That's not the reason why Erika uses it, though. Erika tells us the reason why she uses it that way. She does it to try to say that Tompkins' result is inaccurate. She said because you can take two different things of the same kind and get the same results, and they're the same as, you know, what you get for chimps and humans and things like that. Which of course they're different organisms, so it doesn't really hurt anything and doesn't prove anything, and that's the problem. But if you wanted to test the make sure the algorithm is working properly, then yeah, you could probably use these kinds of controls for that. Now, Korf did bring up some controls that I thought was good, you know, like making up sequences and things like that. You could do that. Now, did Tompkins do this? Well, he doesn't say he did made up sequences put in there. I think that he was mostly focused on the chimp and human, because that's what his study was over. And a lot of evolutionists are like this. They're just focused on whatever their study is about. Sometimes they may exercise some controls, sometimes they don't. There's no required rule that says they have to. You know, they could still pass peer review even if they don't offer controls. But I think it's better if they offer controls. They should offer controls, and sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And Korf tries to get around this by saying, oh, well, it's in the background of the experiment. Well, that's inconsistent. What if it's in the background of Tompkins' study? Then how would you know? So, you know, there's always a possibility that things could go in the background of a study that we don't know about. That's possible. But the only thing that we actually can evaluate is what Tompkins put in print and what he's said personally, and that sort of thing. That's all we can, particularly public, you know, in the public sphere. That's all we can basically look at. So let's look at some of his papers, and we're going to talk about that. We're over here in his 2011 paper. This paper we went over last week, and we talked about the fact that he used two different experiments, one masking, one unmasking, and 5 different e-values, 1010, 0.1, 0.001, and my favorite e-value, 0.00001, for a total of 1.2 million attempted genome-wide alignments. That also included 3 word sizes, which is 7, 11, and 15. He tried all 3 word sizes as well. And depending on the word sizes, depending on the e-values, depending on whether he's using masking or unmasking, he received different results. I think in this particular study, he was trying to go with the most liberal percentage of the study, the most liberal of them, rather than the most conservative. So he was taking that into account. But he doesn't use any controls per se in here. I don't know whether you can consider that the controls don't have to be just organism comparing to another organism. That's one type of control, but it doesn't have to necessarily be that. I wonder if him trying out different e-values to see different results and word sizes and masking and unmasking, whether this acted as a control or not. I doubt it would be considered a control, but it is interesting that he is trying different settings. So this paper is mostly about him trying different settings and parameters. And just to clarify something, I'll probably bring this up later on in the series as well, but one of the things that's a pet peeve of mine of people dealing with this study is that they're not willing to give Tompkins any grace at all. They're not willing to consider that each study is going to be, he has his own purpose and goal in what he's trying to accomplish in each study. And that has to be taken into consideration when you're looking at that. And also another thing is a lot of people are thinking that Tompkins is using one method. He's not using one method. He's actually using different methods depending on which study, which paper we're at. So if we're dealing with 2011 paper, he's using a different study in this than he did in 2013. He used a different method in his 2015 paper from his 2013 paper, because the 2015 paper also used two different other algorithms as well as BLAST, an older version of BLAST, because there was an anomaly, a bug that was found in the system. And so he's using other ways in which to look at that. In 2016 paper, he's testing 101 data sets, and he's got a different method there and different method in his 2018 paper as well, which he actually uses gapped alignment in 2018 paper. So he's using different methods depending on which paper and which study. Each paper represents a different study. Each study represents a different method. So it's not just one method he's using overall. He's not just using the same method every single time. And so when you challenge his method, the proper way to do this is to challenge his method for every paper on a case-by-case basis. Because what you might have an issue with in one paper may be different from your issues in another paper. And so you can't just simply evaluate his arguments overall in a general sense. You have to do it individually every paper. But because Erika was so focused on the ungapped parameter, which makes very little difference, because she was so focused on him using that, that whenever she did do an individual evaluation of the papers, her main focus was on him always using ungapped until he got to his 2018 paper, which he used gapped. And that's what became the issue for Erika. All right. So in this paper, he doesn't use any controls that I'm aware. He does use lots of different settings and parameters and to test and see what the results would be of that. All right. This paper is the one with the bug in it. This is his 2013 paper. Comprehensive analysis of chimpanzee and human chromosomes reveals average DNA similarity of 70%. Turned out there was a bug in the algorithm. He does retract this in his 2015 paper. This one has, I think this one doesn't have any controls that are used, but he does use a control with this particular algorithm in his 2015 paper in order to try to figure out a mystery and try to get to the bottom of it. So let's go here. This would be his 2015 paper, Documented Anomaly in Recent Versions of the BLAST-N Algorithm and a Complete Reanalysis of Chimpanzee and Human Genome-Wide DNA Similarity using NUC-MER and LASSI. I do not know if those are the correct ways to pronounce those acronyms. I'm not exactly sure if they are, but it doesn't really matter if I pronounce it correctly or not. I'm sure somebody in the comments says, that's not how you pronounce it correctly. Okay, don't focus on that. Focus on the arguments. All right. I don't always pronounce things correctly, but that's not very relevant. All right. Okay, and you go further, and actually this one does use another control, he controls the whether the results are going to be similar or the same, or what, by using other algorithms. He uses an older version of BLAST-N, but the pre-bug, but he also uses the NUCMIR and LAST-Z algorithms. Now, there's always a possibility that all three algorithms could have a bug in it. There's always a possibility of that. But what controls do is they're not supposed to necessarily eliminate the problem completely, but rather reduce the chances of that happening. In this case, by using the NUCMIR and LAST-Z algorithm, he is checking his results to see if he gets similar results using different algorithms, and as well as an algorithm pre-bug. I can't believe I said plug. Pre-bug algorithm, and he's using that, and in order to show that that he's getting similar results, even though he's doing a reassessment of that analysis, and he's coming up with results, I think close to 80%, maybe. I have to see what his results was. I forgot what his results were. But this right here can be considered a control too, because it eliminates, it kind of reduces the chances of there being a bug. There's always a possibility of being a bug in all three, but it's less likely than it being a bug in one. So someone could say, well, maybe the BLAST-N program also still has a bug in it, or had a bug in it before you knew about it, whatnot. And this right here, it says, okay, we're going to check our results by using different algorithms, and we're going to see if they have similar conclusions. And so that is a control. That's one control he's using. He's not using just that. He actually does use a self-to-self control. Adding even more mystery to the behavior of the algorithm was the fact that when controls are employed, that means he did use controls, such as matching the query sequence against the genome of the query species, 100% of the hits are returned at about 100% similarity. A self-to-self. Now, of course, self-to-self doesn't guarantee that there's not going to be a bug in the algorithm. So controls aren't foolproof in that sense. But the claim that he did not practice controls is inaccurate. He did. I don't know if this is a control that he did in the background of his 2013 paper, or if this is a control he did in the background of here. He mentions some unpublished data that he had as well on that. But he said that when controls were employed, he said 100% of the hits are returned at about 100% similarity. That's interesting. So he is actually doing controls. So he does more than one control here. He's already got these as controls using different algorithms. And then he has this down here as a control. Again, I don't know if this is in the background of his 2013. Maybe it's in between his 2013 and 2015 study. Possibly in the background of his 2015 study. I'm not 100% sure. But this paper is about that algorithm, so it's possible that could be a control that he's doing here. But either way, he's returning back 100% result. And he says that's just increasing the mystery. It's adding more to the mystery of what's going on here. And so this is why he's publishing this paper. He's why he's doing all of these different things and testing different versions of BLAST and that sort of thing. And of course, there is a bug in the algorithm. But he is actually doing a self-to-self test. So this right here shows that he is actually employing controls. He even talks about them, employing controls. Whether this is happening in the background, whether this is happening in previous studies, whether this is happening in this study, whatever the case may be, the point is he is exercising controls. All right, let's go further. Okay, this is his 2016 paper with the 101 data sets. We talked about that. Well, we haven't really talked about it per se, but this is the paper that Dr. Swami Das was responding to. And in this one, he doesn't practice any controls that I've seen openly as far as that goes in the paper itself. It's a kind of short paper. It's not a very long one, but I don't think he's practiced any controls in there. At least none that's in the paper itself. Now the 2018 paper right here, comparison of 18,000 de novo assembled chimpanzee contigs to the human genome yields average blast-in alignment identities of 84%. Okay, this one he actually does do some controls. This one's an interesting one because he actually compares chimp sequences to see whether or not if humanization is occurring beforehand. He wants to see if it's been humanized. Now, I think it might have been in their clip, the clips I showed you about what Erika did, but I can't remember if it was or not. But I know Erika had said that that he's prevent. Well, at least no, I don't think it's in the clips exactly, but that Erika thinks that he was preventing humanization when he was talking about DNA contamination. I think I've seen part of her video where she says that, and that's incorrect. He was actually doing it in order to humanization and DNA contamination, not the same argument. Those are two separate arguments that he makes because he thinks that a lot of the DNA was decontaminated with human, but humanization is referring to them using the human genome as a scaffold in order to sit there and compare the to be able to reassemble the chip genome when they were using shotgun sequencing. And so so here's Tompkins. He's testing to see whether or not if previous genomes have indeed been humanized. And so he's using Pentro 4, 5, and 6. Now, interesting, he gets a 91% on Pentro 4 right here. He gets he says the neo assembly chimpanzee contig was only 91% when queried against Pentro 4. That means he took the chimpanzee contigs and he compared it with Pentro 4 and he got 91%. But when he did the same thing, he said it's not 100%. It should be 100%. It's not. So you say, okay, well then that might be a problem with the algorithm, or it could be a problem with the chimp sequence. Well, how do you know? Well, you perform a control. All right, so he does it against the improved Pentro 5, and guess what he gets? Drum roll, 100% right here. He gets 100% when he compares. And listen to what he says. Korf talks about how you could do controls to eliminate or to make sure the algorithm is working right. Listen to what he says. He said this is indicating that the blast-in algorithm was functioning properly, and that the Pentro 5 version of the chimpanzee genome was relatively accurate, at least on a local alignment level. Was that a control? Yes, it was. And you could use this as a control. So he's using a control. He's using a control here. Yeah, this shows that the Tompkins is indeed using controls. He's in fact using controls. So the claim that Tompkins is not using controls is 100% false. So that's what I wanted to deal with today, because a lot of people in this controversy has said and claimed that Tompkins is not using controls. This is false. Now, he could always be using controls in the background too. There's no way to know that for sure. I mean, it'd be impossible to tell. I would expect that if he was using controls, he would be in the papers, but there's no guarantee that. When he tested controls with the 2013 situation, it either happened between 2013 and 2015, or he did it as a result of 2015 because his 2015 paper was over that anomaly in the first place. And so he practiced a control. He did a self-to-self to determine what's going on here. And he said it added to the mystery because you would expect that with the problem with the algorithm. So he sat there and began to do some tests and experiments and things like that. But he did practice controls, and he had another additional control in the 2015 paper because he actually added 2 different algorithms, and he tested that against different various versions of blast-in. in order to reassess that reevaluate that number and make sure his algorithms are working right and are not have an issue with it. So he did actually practice controls. So the claim that he didn't practice control is inaccurate. Korf says he doesn't like how he doesn't think that chimp on chimp would be a good control. The fact of the matter is that it actually is a good control, because you don't need the whole chimp sequence to do a control using chimp on chimp or chimp on even if you do two different kinds of chimps, you can still do that and still use control if you know what if you can demonstrate what the present rate is. But it's going to be kind of hard to use that as a control if you're just simply comparing two different organisms. I think that would be true overall, because you'd have to assume one is right and the other is wrong. And so the only real way to do it is probably going to be with a self-to-self. I like his Korf's example of using random sequences and comparing that. I think that's a good idea. I don't have no evidence at this time that Tompkins did anything like that. It's always possible he could have done it in the background, like I said, but there's no way to know it. I would expect it to be in his paper, but maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't. I don't know. But I think that running random sequences like that is a good idea to test the algorithm. That's fine. I'm not sure if Tompkins did that or not, but we did that in using Tompkins' method. The only difference is that I couldn't get it. There's no way for me to get it where it's ungapped as a result, because you can't get it ungapped with the online version. I really wish I could download the actual version of BLAST, but I do know that Carter did some excellent studies on this, on gap versus ungap. And what he has shown is that I think Erika is confusing data categories, where she's confusing ungap with gap and gap with ungap. Because ungap doesn't actually get you higher results, not lower results. Whereas gap will get you lower results. What ungap does is it gives you a larger sequence, but it gives you it gives you shorter sequence but a larger percent identity. Whereas gap will give you a longer sequence but a shorter percent identity. So gap will actually get you a lower score than ungap would. Now, of course, self-to-self, it wouldn't matter at all. You would still get 100% regardless of best alignment. And it doesn't, I don't think it creates spurious alignments. Tompkins is not doing a global percent alignment. He's doing a best alignment. He's looking at the highest scoring hit, and he's taking that, and that is part of his data. Not all the other matches, but that is part of his data. And that's what Tompkins is doing. But anyway, again, thank you for joining me today. Those are just the only things that I wanted to talk about. I want to talk about certain parameters. I wanted to talk about the whether Tompkins used controls or not. He did use controls, as we've seen. So the claim that Tompkins did not use controls is completely false. And I know a lot of Erika supporters will try to argue against it, whatever. I think each experiment, each study needs to be taken on its own merit. It has to be taken on a case-by-case basis. You can't. I think that one of the problems is that everybody's treating each one of these studies as if they're one method, as if they're one thing that Tompkins is doing, and when Tompkins is doing different things depending on which study he's doing. So, and so you really need to take this on a case-by-case basis. But in some studies, he's reported to use controls, while other studies he doesn't. So the claim that he doesn't use controls at all is false. We can demonstrate that he's using at least some controls in at least some of his papers. And so that is completely false to say that he's not using any controls at all. So you can actually find controls being used in his papers. And whether you like his controls or not like his controls, that involves the adequacy or inadequacy of the controls in question, not whether he used controls. The fact that you don't like the controls that he's using doesn't mean he's not using controls. Like, I don't like some of the controls that Erika is using, but I don't sit there and say that must mean Erika didn't use any controls. It means controls were used by Erika, but they didn't really get the job done necessarily in the cases in which Erika's doing it. So that's the issue that I would have there. But I wouldn't say that they're not controls. That they are controls. So Tompkins did use controls, at least in some of his studies. He could have used controls in every case if he's doing controls in the background, but it seems likely that he would report on it, possibly. But either way, the only thing we have to work off is what he reports and not what he does not. So what he does in the background, we don't know unless he tells us. All right, so but that's all for today, and thanks for joining me on the Tompkins controversy on Apologetics 101. And don't forget to like the video, give it a thumbs up, please, and subscribe to my channel. There's a lot more in store. I'm trying to sit there and see if I can get some stuff working out to get some more episodes of the Genesis series going again. Because I would like to kind of push that off into the next year as well. I know Erika is going to be having a response video soon, and that's probably going to prompt me to make more videos on the Tompkins controversy. And so we'll see what happens there, and of course we'll respond to her accordingly. But we'll see what she has in store, because I know she still holds to that gap versus ungap, and now they're taking a kind of a secondary purpose in the whole ungap thing, and so we'll see what she's got in store on that and respond accordingly. I have a feeling I know what direction she's going in, because I think she takes the same position that Ruhip does, and me and Ruhip has had several back and forth on that as well. So. But we'll see. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, thanks again for joining me on there, and we'll see you on the next one.